Chapter 621. The leading wizard waved his wand, and Umbridge, bound by magic, was suspended in the air. Another wizard took Ethan's arcane eye from the table and walked to the fireplace with it. They grabbed Umbridge's arm and spoke to the fire. Alpha United Headquarters. Upon hearing the destination, Umbridge's head jerked up, her eyes wide with horror and confusion. It was only then that she noticed the combat uniforms worn by the wizards bore a resemblance to those of the Aurors, albeit with a different color scheme. Initially, Umbridge mistook them for uniforms of various Auror divisions due to their similar design. However, she soon realized that the insignia on these wizards' uniforms were not the Auror's variant A logo, but the intellectual emblem of the Arcane United Corporation. She reacted immediately, attempting to shout, "Wait, you're not!" But before she could finish, her mouth was sealed shut by magic. Terrified, Umbridge found herself unable to make any sound before their figures vanished into the fire, leaving the headmaster's office in silence. Suddenly, a faint moan broke the silence. Ethan looked down to find Harry lying on the ground, his expression contorted in pain. A pang of guilt struck Ethan. He had momentarily forgotten about Harry. However, he didn't rush to his aid. Beside him, another figure slowly became visible. It was Ginny. Harry's understanding dawned upon him when he saw Ginny. She was the half of the people Ethan had referred to earlier. Ginny had been in the headmaster's office with Ethan all along, hidden from view. Ethan, intending to deal with Umbridge without exposing Ginny prematurely, had kept her hidden to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. At that moment, Ginny stepped forward to assist Ethan. She retrieved a bottle of potion from her robes, a potion Harry had never seen before, and uncorked it. The room filled with a strong medicinal scent as she carefully administered the potion to Harry. He experienced an intense bitterness that seemed more agonizing than the piercing heart curse. But as the bitterness peaked, a refreshing coolness flowed through his body, soothing his tense nerves and alleviating the excruciating pain. After the potion took effect, Harry gradually regained control of his body. Though still weak, he felt significantly better. Suddenly, the room was shaken by a loud bang as the door flew open. Neville Longbottom burst in, wand raised, yelling, "You abominable female toad, let go of Harry!" However, the scene before him left him stunned. Ginny stood closest to Harry, glaring at Neville. Neville's face flushed with embarrassment as he stammered, Miss Weasley, I didn't mean..." His words only tightened Ginny's frown, and she stared at him with growing anger. Neville, realizing his mistake, turned to Ethan, his expression a mix of confusion and respect. "Professor Green, why are you here? And Umbridge?" "We heard Harry's screams." Before Neville could finish, Ron, Colin, and others burst into the room. They found Harry on the ground, evidently in pain. Ron rushed to Harry's side, asking with concern, "Harry, are you all right?" "We knocked out Filch and came running when we heard you scream." Outside the door, Argus Filch, the Hogwarts caretaker, and his cat, Mrs. Norris, lay petrified, their faces twisted in fear. Filch's arms were outstretched as if caught in the midst of an action. When Harry saw Ron and the others, a warm current surged in his heart. He realized they must have taken such drastic actions to prevent him from being imprisoned and interrogated by Umbridge. He was deeply moved by their courage and friendship, willing to risk expulsion from Hogwarts, to attack the staff and break into the headmaster's office. Despite the pain, he managed to squirm over and embrace them, and Ginny, of course. It was only with Ethan's help that she was able to escape danger, making her one of the key figures in saving him. However, under Ethan's piercing gaze, Harry decided against hugging Ginny, opting to pat her shoulder instead, and expressed his gratitude. Thank you so much." "Little Ginny is the only one I can hold," Ethan whispered where Harry couldn't hear him. Ginny caught Ethan's words, and a sweet, satisfied smile spread across her face. Meanwhile, Ron was frantically checking Harry for injuries, his hands moving anxiously over him. Ethan silently made his way to the petrified Lady Loris and Filch. With a gentle wave of his wand, he lifted the petrification charm under the watchful eyes of the Gryffindors. As soon as Filch could move again, he rushed to Ethan, clinging to his trouser legs. "Thank you, Professor Green, for saving me," Filch exclaimed. "But those dreadful Gryffindor students attacked me, especially Neville Longbottom, who even went after my cat. They must be punished." Please, Professor Green, let me handle them. Filch then noticed something amiss in the headmaster's office. His biggest supporter, Umbridge, was missing. Confused, he asked, where is Headmaster Umbridge? Ethan looked at Filch with a hint of pity. Argus, I'm sorry to inform you that Headmaster Umbridge has been arrested on suspicion of serious criminal activities. You should take your cat, Lady Loris, to Madame Pomfrey to ensure you're both all right. Shocked by the news, Filch attempted to persuade Ethan to punish the Gryffindor students once more, but ultimately remained silent. As Filch and Lady Loris left, Ethan approached Neville, causing the Gryffindor students to gather nervously, fearing punishment. Ron bravely stepped in front of Neville, declaring, Professor Ethan, if anyone is to be punished, it should be all of us. Harry also stepped forward, pleading, Ethan, please, they were all trying to help me. Ethan signaled for silence with a gentle wave of his hand. His gaze softened as he looked at each Gryffindor student, finally resting on Neville's trembling form. Neville Longbottom and Ron Weasley, you broke school rules by attacking faculty members, a grave offense. I must deduct 50 points from Gryffindor House, he announced, causing dismay among the students. However, Ethan's tone shifted as he continued, but you also played a crucial role in capturing Umbridge. Therefore, I'm awarding 20 points each to Ginny, Neville, and Harry. Instead of losing points, Gryffindor House gained an additional 10 points. The students, especially Neville and Harry, were stunned by this turn of events, their expressions a mix of surprise and relief. Ethan looked at their astonished faces and smiled wryly. Why the surprise? I'm not being biased, but let's try to avoid involving Filch next time, shall we? Playing a prank on a squib using wizarding tricks is in poor taste. Neville's chubby face instantly flushed with embarrassment, and he hung his head in shame, while Harry breathed a sigh of relief, feeling as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his heart. However, he remained focused on his mission. Lifting his head with determination, he addressed Ethan. Professor Ethan, I need your assistance. Sirius has been captured by Voldemort in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. I've written to Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape, but they haven't taken it seriously. You once advised me to think for myself. Professor Ethan, I truly believe Sirius is in danger this time. I implore you to help me rescue him. He's my only family. Harry was acutely aware of the dangers of confronting Voldemort, but to save Sirius, he had no choice but to seek Ethan's aid. He understood that facing such dark forces alone was beyond him, and Ethan, possibly with the support of his sister Gianna's significant influence within the Ministry of Magic, might be his best chance. With their assistance, the likelihood of successfully rescuing Sirius would greatly increase. Ethan listened to Harry's plea in silence, then slowly shook his head. Harry, although I've always encouraged you to think independently, this time, well, let me be straightforward. I know you're anxious, but don't worry. I've already made arrangements within the Ministry of Magic. We'll need to wait until nightfall before we head to the Ministry. I promise to return your godfather to you unharmed. As he spoke, Ethan's gaze shifted to Ginny and the others who were standing by. Before we depart, I still need to take Ginny and a few of you. Chapter 622, The Tension of Waiting. The wait is always long, especially during such tense and uncertain times. In the headmaster's room, only Harry, Ethan, and Ginny remained, enveloped in an indescribably dreary and anxious atmosphere. Ethan had decided not to inform Luna and Gabrielle of their plans to venture to the Ministry of Magic. Although he believed Luna's psychic abilities were on par with Hermione and Zhang-Chu's, her youth and tendency to fall into trances made Ethan hesitant to involve her in such a dangerous battle. Ethan had initially preferred to bring the battle-experienced Sorella and Penelope along. However, Hermione's insistence and his reluctance to make Zhang-Chu feel excluded swayed his decision. He was confident in the combat skills Hermione and Zhang-Chu had developed under his guidance over the years. As long as he could contain Voldemort, he believed the other Death Eaters would not pose a significant threat. Harry, restless and filled with worry for Sirius and the upcoming battle, frequently glanced at his slightly old watch and tapped his feet lightly on the ground. Ethan, noticing Harry's fidgeting, sighed softly and approached him, leaving his whispered conversation with Ginny. Harry, Don't worry too much. When we get to the Ministry of Magic, you don't need to join the fight. Just protect yourself. We'll take care of everything, Ethan reassured him. Despite his words, Ethan knew Harry's stubborn nature all too well and sighed again, realizing his advice might be in vain. He shrugged his shoulders, deciding not to push further. He wasn't Harry's father, after all. But as a friend, he felt compelled to offer some guidance. Harry, if you're really determined to participate in this battle, then I think you need to master a more offensive spell. When facing enemies, stop relying solely on the disarming charm, Ethan advised, noticing Harry's reluctance. He gently reminded him, remember, our operation's purpose is to rescue your godfather. Wouldn't you like to learn new spells for him? Harry's resolve was immediately evident. He was willing to do anything for Sirius, including learning new spells, even if they bordered on the dark arts. However, he hesitated, questioning, Ethan, can I really learn a new spell in such a short time? Ethan smiled confidently. Of course, Harry. It's not difficult to learn. It's a traditional spell called Divine Blade. Harry, unknowingly influenced by Voldemort's soul fragment within him, had a remarkable aptitude for the dark arts. Ethan knew that with his guidance, Harry could master the spell even faster than he might expect. Divine Blade is a hidden, vicious, yet powerful form of black magic. The spell doesn't show any obvious signs when cast, but it causes the opponent's skin to split as if by an invisible sword, resulting in severe bleeding. The damage cannot be healed by ordinary means, but there is a counterspell that can remedy it. I'll teach you that after our mission, Ethan explained. Harry's curiosity was piqued. He had never heard of such a spell, but sensed its power from Ethan's description. Ethan, noticing Harry's hesitation due to the spell's dark nature, revealed, Harry, the inventor of this spell, was a man I admire greatly. He sacrificed everything for the people he loved, even though he himself had been exploited by Voldemort and Dumbledore. Even I used to take advantage of him. Harry was slightly stunned. He had never heard Ethan speak so candidly about a person, nor had he imagined there was such a story behind this spell. Curiosity piqued. He couldn't help but ask, who is he? Ethan paused for a moment, seemingly lost in thought, before he sidestepped Harry's question and began to explain the essence of the spell. The spell is Sectum Sempra, and you should swing the wand like this. As he spoke, Ethan demonstrated the correct motion for casting the spell. Now, go over there and practice for a while, but don't cast it on anyone. Harry nodded, turned, and walked out of the headmaster's room to practice in the hallway. Why? This successfully alleviated Harry's agitation, leaving only Ethan and Ginny in the room. Without the proverbial third wheel, the two finally relaxed and almost simultaneously let down their guards. Of course, Ethan remained respectful. After all, Ginny had insisted on accompanying him to the Ministry of Magic, and since Ethan was taking care of Harry, he felt it was only right to give Ginny an emergency lesson. As night fell, the group, cloaked in starlight, stealthily approached the Ministry of Magic via the Floo network, eventually reaching the telephone booth elevator. Ron, taking the lead without hesitation, picked up the receiver and expertly dialed 62442, the numbers spelling out magic on an old-fashioned mobile phone keypad, serving as the password for the Ministry of Magic's visitor entrance. The dial spun rapidly before returning to its original position, followed by an indifferent female voice echoing through the booth. Welcome to the Ministry of Magic. Please state your name and purpose. Ron quickly listed the names of their group. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Ginny Weasley, Neville Longbottom, Colin Creevey. We're here to visit the Department of Mysteries. Thank you, the voice replied mechanically. Guests, please pick up the badge and pin it to the front of your clothes. Several badges slid out of a metal chute, intended for coin returns. Ginny quietly collected them and distributed the badges to everyone. Guests of the Ministry of Magic, please proceed to the security checkpoint and register your wand, the voice continued. The security desk is at the end of the main hall. Got it. Harry felt an inexplicable nervousness, his scar throbbing once more. Can we move now? Suddenly, the floor of the phone booth began to shake violently, guided by a mysterious force. The sidewalk outside the window rose, and darkness enveloped them. With a dull grinding sound, they seemed to be swallowed into an unknown abyss. descending into the depths of the Ministry of Magic. A thin, silky golden light snaked past their feet, gradually widening until their figures were completely enveloped. In this cramped space, Ron displayed an unprecedented level of calm. Beside him, Ginny clutched her brother's wrist tightly, her face etched with nervousness and worry. Harry, meanwhile, held his wand at the ready, crouching as low as possible and peering through the blurred glass window, trying to discern if anyone awaited them in the main hall. However, the main hall appeared empty, greeted only by a deep silence. The light was dimmer than during the daytime, and the mantelpieces on the walls were deserted, with no sign of a fire. As the elevator came to a halt, Harry looked up to see a golden symbol still writhing on the dark blue canopy, as if whispering some mysterious spell. "The Ministry of Magic wishes you a pleasant evening," the mechanical female voice announced, breaking the brief silence. The door to the phone booth swung open, and Harry, followed by Ron and Ginny, staggered out. Their footsteps echoed in the empty main hall, sounding unusually loud in the silence. Harry's heart sank as he realized the gravity of their situation. In stark contrast to the bustling and noisy atmosphere of his last trial, the silence that now enveloped the main hall was almost suffocating. The only sounds that pierced this quiet were the mechanical female voices greeting and the constant murmur of water from the golden fountain. Water streamed from the wands of witches, the arrowheads of centaurs, the hats of elves, and the ears of house elves, converging into a circular pool below. Harry cast a pleading look at Ron and Ginny beside him. Ron remained serene, as if he was already familiar with everything before them. He offered Harry a gentle smile, attempting to alleviate the tension and unease. "It's okay, Harry. It's after hours. It's normal for it to be empty. If it's already night, he's alive. He's still fighting. I can feel it. If Voldemort had concluded that Sirius wouldn't surrender, I would know." Harry's voice quivered, a sharp pain emanating from the scar on his forehead. He closed his eyes, striving to quell the inner turmoil. As they hastened towards the elevator, Harry's sense of foreboding intensified. He reached out and firmly pressed the button marked down. Suddenly, with a loud bang, an elevator responded. The golden gate doors slid open with a gentle clang, and they hurried inside. Ron pressed the 9th floor button, the doors slammed shut, and the elevator began its slow descent. In the ensuing silence, the only sound was the clattering of chains, reverberating through the vacant elevator shaft. Chapter 623. Finally, the elevator came to a halt, and an indifferent woman's voice announced, "Department of Mysteries." The gate slid open, and they stepped into the hallway outside. Silence enveloped them, broken only by the nearest torches swaying from the air, whistling from the elevator, casting dappled light and shadows around. Harry's heart raced as he faced the all-black door. For many months, this door had haunted his dreams, and now he stood before it. "It should be this way," Harry whispered, leading the way down the hallway, with the group following in silence. Approaching the door, Harry felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. It opened softly at his touch, as if in a dream. Taking a deep breath, he led the group across the threshold. They entered a large circular room, enveloped in darkness as if time itself had paused. The floor and ceiling were a breathtaking black, reminiscent of an endless night sky, both deep and mysterious. The surrounding walls, inlaid with pitch-black doors, were indistinguishable from each other, resembling silent black holes. Even the handles were hidden in the darkness. Here and there, branch-like candles with blue flames flickered, casting cold light on the smooth marble floor and creating sparkling reflections, giving the illusion of being underwater. "Remember to close the door," Ron's voice whispered, careful not to disturb the quiet darkness. Neville complied, and as the torch-lit hallway closed behind them, the last ray of light vanished. The room plunged into deeper darkness, with only the trembling blue flames and their eerie shadows, which roamed like ghosts. In Harry's dreams, he had always navigated the room without hesitation, heading straight for the door opposite the entrance. However, now faced with 12 indistinguishable doors, he felt a sense of confusion. He scrutinized each one, trying to discern the path to his destination. Ginny clutched her brother's arm, her eyes filled with deep unease, as if fearing the floor might suddenly spin. Yet the floor remained as solid as ever. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound echoed, shaking them to their core. The candle flames trembled violently, as if stirred by some unseen force. Then, the circular wall began to rotate slowly. Ginny's grip on her brother's arm tightened, panic evident on her face, though the floor remained stable. For a few seconds, the walls spun at an alarming speed, and the blue flames danced wildly, blurring into a spectacle of light and shadow. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the rumbling ceased. The walls stopped spinning, and calm returned. Harry's eyes, still adjusting to the sudden stop, flashed with bands of blue light. He looked around, momentarily disoriented, and asked uncertainly, "Which door shall we enter?" "That's the—" Neville began, but a stern look from Ginny silenced him. Ron, noticing Neville's hesitation, followed his gaze, then turned to Harry and asked, "Harry, what did you see in your dream?" Harry swallowed, trying to recall the vision from his dream. "In my dream, I exited the elevator, went through the door at the end of the hallway, and entered a dark room just like this one. Then I walked through another door and found myself in a place that seemed to glow." "We should try a few doors," he said, his pace quickening with excitement. "I'll know if we find the right one. Hurry." With that, he strode towards the door opposite them, the others following closely behind. Harry placed his left hand, Ethan pressed his hand against the cold, shiny door and raised his wand, ready to strike as soon as the door opened. With a hard push, the door swung open, revealing a sight that immediately shocked them. After the darkness of the first room, this rectangular room seemed much brighter, illuminated by a soft glow from several lamps suspended from the ceiling by gold chains. However, the room lacked the flickering lights Ethan had seen in his dreams. It was empty, save for a few solitary tables. In the center stood a huge glass water tank, its dark green liquid emitting a faint glow. Pearly white objects floated lazily in the water, creating the illusion of a serene underwater world. They stared at the mysterious tank, their hearts brimming with doubts and curiosity. Neville leaned close to the tank, his eyes pressed against the glass as he peeked inside. The objects in the green liquid glowed eerily, flickering and dancing like slimy cauliflower in the depths of the sea. Ethan removed his glasses, gently wiped them with his sleeve, and put them back on, focusing intently on the strange sight within the tank. He turned to his companions and asked, "Are these things a special kind of fish?" Neville's mouth curved into a slight smile, revealing a hint of innocent curiosity. "Can you eat them?" he asked. Ginny immediately frowned and snorted coldly. "Idiot, these aren't fish, they're brains. I've seen something similar in Ethan's book. Don't touch them, or they'll entangle you with the tentacles of your thoughts and leave indelible scars on your spirit. I don't want to have to apply Doctor's Oblivion ointment to your fat body." Neville shrugged and took a few steps back, maintaining a safe distance from the tank. "Got it. No need to be so fierce," he muttered. Ethan clapped his hands and looked around. "We need to get out of here. Something isn't right." He suggested finding another door to try. As they turned back to the dark, round room, Ginny walked last. Before leaving, she raised her wand, traced a mysterious symbol in the air, and whispered, "Mark, appear." Instantly, a fiery red X appeared on the door they had just exited, burning like a flame in the darkness. The door slammed shut, followed by a loud rumble. The walls began to spin rapidly again, but amidst the chaotic blur, the golden red X stood out. When everything stilled, the fiery X remained, marking the door as one they had already tried. Ethan hurried to the mysterious door opposite, with the others following closely. He gripped his wand tightly, prepared himself, and pushed the door open. A cold air current swept over their faces as they entered a space even larger than the previous room. In the dim light, the rectangular room recessed in the center, forming a huge stone crater about 20 feet deep. Standing on the top benches of the top floor, they could clearly see the stone benches extending down at a steep angle, reminiscent of an old circular theater, reminding Ethan of the courtroom during the Wizardry trial. However, this place had no chained chair at its center. Instead, a tall stone platform held an ancient and dilapidated stone arch. No walls surrounded the arch, only a tattered black curtain or drapery hung from it. Despite the absence of a breeze in the cold air, the drapery fluttered gently, as if caressed by an unseen hand. Ron, driven by curiosity, quickly descended the rows of stone benches to the bottom of the pit. He slowed his pace and cautiously approached the high platform, each step echoing dully. From this vantage point, the pointed arches appeared even taller and more mysterious. The curtains continued to sway gently, as if whispering secrets. Ron suddenly felt a strange sensation, as if something behind the arch had noticed his presence and was inexplicably drawing him closer. Ethan felt an inexplicable pull towards the arch, as if an invisible force beckoned him to explore the mysteries that lay beyond. This peculiar sensation stirred a mix of curiosity and unease within him, causing his heart to race and his palms to sweat. Just as he was about to give in to this strange urge, Harry's voice pierced through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. "Ron, listen." Harry approached with a sense of urgency, his brow furrowed as he gazed at the softly swaying curtain. "I heard someone whispering from behind there. Could it be Sirius?" Ethan shook his head, dispelling the thought. "It can't be Sirius, Harry. Did you know about the dark history of this curtain? It was once used as a death chamber until Damocles Roar, the second Minister of Magic, took office in 1718. He negotiated with the sect Dementors to use Azkaban for imprisoning and punishing criminals. Anyone who passes through that curtain meets their end, without exception." The eerie sensation grew stronger, yet it seemed that only Ethan was truly aware of its intensifying presence. Chapter 6 and 24. Harry's attention remained fixed on the fluttering drapery, captivated as if by some mysterious force. Ron exchanged a glance with Neville, who then approached Harry, gently lifted him, and guided him back to the stone bench at the base. The group made their way up, and soon found themselves back at the door. Ron took one last look at the area known as the Hall of Death, surveying his surroundings with a nod of satisfaction. He then turned his gaze to Ginny beside him and winked. Ginny nodded in response, raised her wand, and traced a mysterious symbol through the air before marking the door with a burning X. With a rumbling sound, they found themselves back in the dark, circular room. Ron, squinting at Harry, seemed to read his thoughts and spoke slowly. "This so-called Hall of Death is probably the most well-known aspect of the Department of Mysteries. It was once used as a death chamber, shrouded in horror and mystery. Although it's not taught at Hogwarts now, legends and stories about it still circulate among young wizards." He paused before continuing. "For young or weak-willed wizards, the visions beyond the curtain can be confusing. Those inexperienced with death may interpret these visions based on their own feelings towards it, be it fear or indifference. And those who have brushed shoulders with death, either personally or through the loss of others, might find themselves drawn to the curtain, unable to look away." Ron's voice took on a low, mournful tone, and for those wizards who have lost loved ones, the whispers of the dead here can be haunting. The drapery creates the illusion that the deceased is just on the other side. Harry snapped out of his trance, his expression a mix of fear and confusion. The room had almost made him forget his purpose, leaving him lost in the visions and whispers. Ron approached Harry with a serene expression and placed his hand firmly on his shoulder. "Harry, I sensed your thoughts. You seem to find the curtain's call gentle, developing a strong desire to pass through it. I understand the weight of your burdens, the pain you've endured, and your longing to see your loved ones. But this also means you're being subconsciously tempted by death." Harry nodded subconsciously in agreement. However, Ron's next action was a sharp slap on the shoulder, jolting Harry from his reverie. "Harry, this is no excuse to escape reality and shirk your responsibilities." The pain twisted Harry's shoulder, serving as a harsh wake-up call. Clarity returned to his mind, and he remembered his dream. Sirius, imprisoned and tortured, while he was foolishly obsessed with the mysterious curtain. Ron released him, and Harry staggered back, rubbing his sore shoulder with a look of shame. He avoided Ron's gaze, his eyes drifting towards the door they had just left. "Thank you. I'm fine. Let's move on," Harry said, his voice trembling. Ron nodded to the others, signaling them to keep pace with Harry. The wall began to spin once more, and Harry pushed the door open, revealing a new scene. "This is it," Harry exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. His eyes were drawn to the diamond-bright leaping light, evoking an inexplicable sense of familiarity. As his vision adjusted, the room came into full view. Countless clocks and bookshelves adorned the walls, varying in size and design, some solemn and elegant, others small and exquisite. Grandfather clocks and travel clocks were either nestled between bookshelves or stood on tables that spanned the room. These clocks, each telling the story of time, ticked rapidly, their sounds merging into a unique symphony. The room was filled with a sound reminiscent of thousands of small footsteps, emanating from a bell-shaped glass dome at the room's end. "We need to hurry," Ron said, his frown betraying his annoyance with the relentless ticking of clocks that filled the space, amplifying the passage of time. "This way," Harry exclaimed, his heart racing with anticipation. He navigated through the narrow gaps between tables, mirroring the actions from his dreams. Ron and the others followed closely, their steps light and swift, driven by a fear of missing out. As they neared the towering glass dome, Ginny pointed towards its center, her voice filled with excitement. "Oh, look!" In the dim light, a small, jewel-like egg floated midair, radiating a soft glow reminiscent of a long-lost treasure. The group watched in awe as the egg cracked open, revealing a beautiful hummingbird. Its feathers sparkled brilliantly under the light, and it flapped its wings gently, as though preparing for flight. However, its attempt was short-lived. The bird's feathers became damp, and it struggled before landing at the bottom of the enclosure, only to be encased in the egg once more. "Keep walking. Don't stop," Ron urged, noticing Ginny's fascination with the transformation. He reassured her, "We can visit here again in the future. I can even bring you myself, but right now we have more important tasks at hand." Ginny nodded, her usual lively independence replaced by a reliance on her brother, a change that went unquestioned by the others due to their recent estrangement. The group continued past the glass dome to a door at the back. Ron pushed it open, and they were greeted by silence, a stark contrast to the previous room's cacophony. This new room, tall and empty like a church, housed high shelves adorned with tiny, dusty glass balls, each accompanied by a yellowed label narrating its story. The faint blue glow of candles added a mysterious ambiance to the dimly lit corridor. Harry and Ron led the way through the rows of glass balls, their footsteps echoing in the silent space. Occasionally, a ball shimmered softly as they passed. 97 platoons have arrived," Ron announced, breaking the silence. He stopped, turning to Harry, who appeared confused and lost, the scene before him overlapping with the memory of his dream, yet missing a crucial figure. "I don't understand. This is the place from my dreams, but Sirius isn't here. He may—" Harry's voice trailed off, filled with confusion and loss. "Harry," Ron called softly, redirecting Harry's focus. He pointed to a dusty glass ball on a shelf. "Give me that one, and don't touch anything else." Ron's tone carried a note of caution. Harry, puzzled by Ron's reluctance to retrieve the ball himself, approached it. To his surprise, the glass ball was not cold but emitted a warm light, as if it had been bathed in sunlight for an extended period. Beneath the glass sphere, a yellowed label bore a date and mysterious abbreviations in delicate lettering, SPT to APWBD, the Dark Lord and Harry Potter. Harry read aloud, his curiosity piqued by the cryptic message. The words on the label sparked an inexplicable premonition in Ethan's heart. He carefully grasped the orb with his fingers, feeling the faint heat it radiated. Harry was filled with expectation, and even a hint of desperation, for something dramatic to unfold. He hoped that this seemingly ordinary glass ball would unveil the true purpose of their trip and add value to their long and crisis-ridden journey. He slowly lifted the glass ball from the shelf, his eyes wide with anticipation. However, when nothing happened, Harry handed the crystal ball to Ron in disappointment. Ron took it with care, gently brushing off the dust, and examined it closely. Suddenly, he motioned for everyone to come closer, positioning himself so that he blocked the others, a look of vigilance on his face. Chapter 625. At that moment, a string of wanton and arrogant laughter from a woman shattered the silence, echoing from all directions and sending chills down everyone's spine. In a childlike tone, she taunted, "Oh, that red-haired boy must be one of the poor Weasleys, isn't it? Hand it over, good boy, little." As her voice faded, numerous dark shadows materialized around them, effectively blocking their escape. The cold glint in the eyes of these figures, visible through the gaps in their hoods, along with over 24 wands pointed directly at Harry and his companions, charged the atmosphere with tension. "Humph, Shiro has been tailing you for quite some time. Hurry up and hand it over, demanded a wizard, his face obscured by a brass-colored mask adorned with golden vines, a sinister smile playing on his lips. As he spoke, his wand emitted an orange-yellow flame that soared into the air, burning brightly for a moment before gradually extinguishing. Next time, I'll aim at that cute little girl's face, he threatened. Ron, undeterred, snorted coldly and tightened his grip on the glass ball. If you dare to set fire again, I'll smash this. Hold it steady, boy. If it breaks, I'll crush your bones one by one, a wizard with a silver mask and a black background warned slowly. He then approached the fire-casting wizard and whispered, If it's smashed, the master will not be lenient with us. Remember our mission. Where's Sirius? Harry roared at the Death Eaters, his voice reverberating through the empty halls. Where's Sirius? Mocked the woman in the brass mask, imitating Harry's roar before bursting into hysterical laughter, clearly amused by her own jest. Ron, clutching the glass ball firmly, gave everyone a determined look. Follow me, he whispered, signaling for the others to follow his lead. Suddenly, the female Death Eater screamed, Prophecy ball, fly. It was clear she intended to use her magic to seize the orb. However, Ron was ready. With a swift motion, he drew his wand and cast a spell that sent the woman tumbling through the air, thwarting her attempt to cast her spell. Then, Ron aimed his wand at the woman, who was now struggling frantically, her eyes filled with fear and anger visible through the slits of her mask. What are you planning to do? She snapped. Ron pressed his wand against the glass orb, producing a screeching sound as if the glass was being slashed. The Death Eaters on the other side grew visibly nervous. Let your people step aside, or it won't end well for you, Ron warned, his voice cold. Be careful. Don't provoke him, lest it shatters. A wizard wearing a Black Knight's mask cautioned the witch, his tone laced with nervousness and concern. With Ron's wand still pressed against the orb, the Death Eaters blocking their path reluctantly moved aside, screaming and cursing, yet powerless to intervene. Harry and the others, wands at the ready, cautiously retreated out of the hall. The dark figures of the Death Eaters followed closely, yet they dared not approach too closely because of the glass ball in Ron's possession. They exited the mysterious hall, the ticking of clocks filling their ears, echoing in Harry's mind and amplifying his irritation and anxiety. They navigated carefully through the narrow gaps between tables, wary of knocking over the ancient clocks. At that moment, the witch, seemingly unable to contain herself any longer, subtly raised her wand. However, the wizard with the silver mask and black background was quick to act, pressing down on her wrist. Don't be reckless. We need that prophecy ball. Wait until we're in an open space, he cautioned in a low voice. I really want to take this mask off. It's so uncomfortable. Lestrange never had to hide his identity, and you're still as timid as you were facing those bludgers in a Quidditch match, Lucius. The Golden Vine Mask wizard grumbled as he removed his mask, revealing his true identity. It was revealed that the mysterious figure was Rudolph Lestrange, a notorious Death Eater. Don't call me by my name, Lucius, his face obscured by a black-silver mask, roared in anger. You're now a wanted man. Acting impulsively will only lead to disaster. Seizing the moment, Harry interjected, It's called the Prophecy Orb. What is this Prophecy Orb you've been fighting over? And where is Sirius? Why isn't he here? He began to suspect that Voldemort might have deceived him through his dreams, as Professor McGonagall had warned. Ron shook his head in dismay. Harry, many have tried to tell you to learn the difference between dreams and reality. As for the Prophecy Orb, he paused, then continued, have you never wondered why the Dark Lord wanted to kill you in the first place? Someone made a prophecy about me and Voldemort, Harry repeated, surprised. His gaze fixated on the prophecy orb Ron clutched tightly. But why does it involve me? Why am I here to take this prophecy orb? Ethan remained silent, but another voice provided the answer. Only those involved in the prophecy can retrieve the prophecy orb from the Department of Mysteries, except for the Silent Man. Now, hand over the prophecy orb. Another figure, clad in a Black Knight's mask, emerged from the shadows of the time chamber. His voice was cold and authoritative, his wand pointed steadily at Harry and his friends. It was Gary Howe's Greengrass, moving slowly but with undeniable authority. His pace, however, seemed to slow down the other Death Eaters, momentarily blocking the exit from the Hall of Time. A sly smile crossed Ron's face as he defiantly waved the prophecy orb at the Death Eaters. "Take it if you want," he taunted, leading the group back into the hall, draped in shadows. The Death Eaters, already inside the hall, eyed the execution chamber warily, yet they quickly formed a barrier at the entrance. The Lestrange couple and Lucius, along with several of their followers, entered the hall, their eyes fixed on the prophecy orb in Ron's hand, their expressions a mix of greed and ferocity. Suddenly, outside the door, a burst of cursing and fighting erupted. Through the slightly ajar door, Harry and the others saw 6 Aurors in new uniforms, wands raised, confronting the lagging Death Eaters. "It's just the Night Guards, and there are less than 10 of them patrolling every night. It's not a big deal," Rudolphus said contemptuously, glancing at the battle outside before returning his gaze to Ron and his group. "Even though they reacted faster than before my imprisonment, their delayed discovery of us clearly shows their incompetence." However, the other Death Eaters didn't share his confidence. Gary House frowned and ordered, "Divide a few people to assist. We must hurry. Once you're done with the kids, set them on fire." Harry and his friends descended the stairs to the lowest part of the hall, struggling to climb up to the high platform in the middle, where a solemn arch stood silently. Just as they were about to reach the top, the Death Eaters, ghost-like, began to close in eerily. At this critical moment, 6 figures suddenly appeared in the spacious execution chamber through phantom shifting. Members of the Order of the Phoenix had arrived just in time. Seeing this, the Death Eaters immediately launched a fierce attack on the Order members. Dark magic and vicious spells flew through the air, creating a thrilling spectacle of magical combat. Amid the chaos and flickering smoke, Harry caught a glimpse of his godfather, Sirius, about 10 feet away, engaged in a fierce duel with a Death Eater. Ethan was so excited that he subconsciously wanted to rush in the direction of Sirius. "Be careful, Mr. Potter," a warning sounded. A spell aimed at Ethan was stopped just in time, and it changed direction, striking the stone steps and blasting them to pieces. Ethan turned to see that it was Professor McGonagall who had saved him. Her hair was neatly combed, her lips pursed, and she was staring at Bellatrix Lestrange, who had long since removed her mask. "Oh, Ethan, you should have more trust in your dean," Lupin said with a wink, adding a touch of humor to the tense atmosphere. He ducked to avoid a spell, then quickly swung his wand, knocking a Death Eater away as they attempted to rush up and attack. He fought his way towards the platform, trying to protect his former student, Ron Weasley. "Don't stand near the arch. It's too dangerous and too conspicuous," Lupin shouted anxiously, his gaze locked on Ron. "You forgot what you learned in my class. Hide." The message about the confusion with the chapters appeared. The 624th was sent incorrectly. It's been sent to chapter 623. Now it's been modified. After refreshing, you can see the real 624. Chapter 626. Kingsley Shacklebolt, a tall, balding black wizard, was engaged in battle with 2 Death Eaters simultaneously. Ever since his promotion after the World Cup, he had dedicated himself to mastering the art of magical duels. Now, he handled the confrontation with a remarkable ease, his wand movements swift like a whirlwind, casting spells that forced his opponents to retreat. Alastair Moody, not clad in his usual Auror uniform, stood halfway up the stone steps. Despite his disability, he fought fearlessly, casting spells at the Death Eaters. He had just incapacitated one when he tripped over his own leg, a momentary lapse that caused him to lose his balance. However, this accidental fall serendipitously made him dodge a disarming charm aimed at him from behind. Quickly recovering, he rolled and rejoined the fray with renewed vigor. Ginny, mindful of Ethan's repeated warnings, used a protective spell to shield Neville and Colin as they retreated outside the platform. They navigated through the many passages in the circular parapet wall beneath the steps, seeking refuge. Despite Ethan's caution, their curiosity often got the better of them, and they occasionally peeked out to watch the ongoing battle. On the high platform, Ron and Lupin fought back-to-back, guarding the prophecy orb. After a brief disagreement, they set aside their differences to confront the advancing Death Eaters together. Ron, with his simple spells and agility, managed not only to hold his own, but also to assist Lupin at critical moments, showcasing his combat prowess. Harry, eager to help, found himself entangled with a Death Eater. He maneuvered deftly, avoiding the relentless attacks. It became clear that the Death Eater, under Voldemort's orders, refrained from using lethal spells against Harry. "Stay away from my boys," Sirius Black bellowed as he charged forward, positioning himself protectively in front of Harry. He cast an iron charm, skillfully deflecting the incoming spells. His wand moved with precision, casting a barrage of colorful spells that overwhelmed the Death Eater. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, the Death Eater was unable to withstand the onslaught. Seizing a momentary opportunity, Harry shouted, "Petrificus totalis!" The Death Eater's limbs instantly stiffened, and he fell backward, hitting the ground with a thud. His mask shattered, revealing a long, distorted face. Harry, momentarily taken aback, recognized the man as Antonin Dolohov from the wanted posters in the Daily Prophet. "Well done, James!" Sirius exclaimed, momentarily mistaking Harry for his father, James Potter. In that fleeting moment, Sirius's face lit up with joy, as if reliving the camaraderie and battles of the past. The battle raged on, with members of the Order of the Phoenix and the Aurors working in unison to repel the Death Eaters. Despite being outnumbered, the Death Eaters struggled to overcome the Order and seize the Prophecy Orb. Bellatrix Lestrange, in a frenzy, managed to deflect a flame arc cast by McGonagall, but was caught off guard by a transfiguration spell from Dean Thomas. The ground beneath her transformed into sharp thorns, catching her by surprise. The skin on Bellatrix's calf was grazed, eliciting a howl of pain as she reflexively leaped away from McGonagall, shedding her Death Eater robes. Beneath, she revealed a striking, albeit somewhat provocative, black ensemble, a testament to the indelible mark Azkaban had left on her, enhancing her beauty in a unique and profound way. Bellatrix, with a blend of grace and madness, stretched her limbs, her face alight with a fervent and unhinged glow, fully immersed in the thrill of battle. Opening her scarred mouth, she cast a curse towards McGonagall, who easily sidestepped the green spell. "Is that all you have, Bellatrix?" McGonagall taunted, her voice icy with disdain, yet she remained vigilant, wand at the ready. Enraged, Bellatrix launched another vicious assault. Meanwhile, Lucius, with a tone dripping with arrogance, addressed the onlookers. "You didn't think we'd dia. The Eaters were so few after our successful raid on Azkaban, did you?" His silver-on-black mask gleamed ominously in the dim light. Tapping the dark mark on his arm, he summoned reinforcements. Black smoke billowed, and soon the room swelled with the apparitions of more Death Eaters, ready for battle. Kingsley Shacklebolt's voice cut through the tension. "Everyone, be careful. Gather on the high platform." He and Moody simultaneously cast a vast iron armor spell, conjuring a robust protective barrier around their allies. The crowd hastened towards the platform, forming a tight circle in preparation for the impending conflict. Moody's magical eye whirled as he scanned the crowd for Lupin and Minerva. "Remus, Minerva, take the kids and the prophecy orbs and get out of here," he bellowed. Lupin's expression tightened. He understood Moody's strategy, to buy time for the younger wizards to escape via apparition, while he and Minerva held off the encroaching Death Eaters. "And what about you, Moody? Are you coming too?" Lupin inquired, concern lacing his voice. "Stop wasting time, Blake. You go as well," Moody retorted, his gaze locking onto Sirius with a mix of sternness and resolve, commanding him as though he were still one of his Aurors. Sirius, however, seemed oblivious to Moody's directive, his gaze fixed tenderly on Harry. He placed a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder, whispering, "Listen, Harry, I need you and your friends to leave now. Protect the prophecy, but more importantly, protect yourselves." Harry's response was one of desperate refusal, his face ashen. "No, I'm staying with you." His voice was laden with resolve. He knew Sirius would not heed Moody's call to retreat, and he could not bear the thought of leaving his friends and mentor behind. It was a matter of honor and loyalty. He was determined to stand and fight alongside Sirius to the very end. Ron, stationed on the high platform, remained silent, an unusual calm amidst the chaos. His gaze was penetrating, surveying the scene with a strategic eye, while his hands subtly reached into his pockets, readying for what was to come. The tense silence was soon shattered by a series of metallic thuds, reminiscent of ancient war drums, accelerating every heart in the room. "What is that?" Harry murmured, his voice trembling, the color draining from his face at the thought of an unseen ambush. The Order of the Phoenix members tensed, their eyes darting around in search of the noise's origin. The Death Eaters, equally perplexed and anxious, also scanned their surroundings. The clashing of metal intensified, sounding like a deluge. Suddenly, all nearby gates swung open, and towering figures charged in. Standing 2 to 3 meters tall and armed, they stormed into the fray, ready to join the battle. Sharp blades gleamed, and their wielders' bodies were encased in metal armor, reminiscent of warriors from ancient legends. Over a dozen such figures stood, their armor reflecting a cold light in the dim illumination, their blades even colder. "Oh, Merlin, it's those Auror steel golems!" a Death Eater exclaimed, his voice laced with terror. As the golems made their entrance, they immediately charged at the Death Eaters. Those who were slow to react found themselves directly in the path of the advancing steel golems. With a swift motion of their blades, the golems' targets had their expressions of fright eternally captured as they were cleaved in two. Their bodies fell heavily to the ground, legs twitching weakly in a final display of life's despair. The remaining Death Eaters, thrown into a frenzy, dodged and retaliated with spells. Their movements were frantic, with many seeking higher ground in a desperate attempt to escape. A few, evidently traumatized by previous encounters with these steel golems during the World Cup siege, scrambled to the top of the stairs and pressed themselves against the wall, seeking a semblance of safety. The scene descended into chaos. The golems' heavy footsteps resounded through the room like thunder, their weapons, swords, spears, and halberds, slicing through the air with each swing, emitting a piercing whistle. The wizard's screams of fear starkly contrasted with the methodical movements of the golems, creating a tableau of terror and determination. Chapter 627. Calm down, you fools. As the Death Eaters descended into chaos, Rudolphus Lestrange's voice cut through the turmoil like a knife. Unlike those who merely boasted, he took immediate action, stepping forward with determination. With a flick of his wand, he conjured a purple-black flame that morphed into a massive fiery serpent in midair. The serpent, with its gaping maw, lunged at a steel golem, ensnaring it in a tight embrace. The intense heat from the serpent began to melt the golem's surface, emitting a creaking noise. Tragically, a Death Eater caught in the crossfire screamed in agony as he and the golem were consumed by the flames, reduced to ashes in moments. Bellatrix Lestrange, with a sneer, exclaimed, "What a bunch of incompetents! They're just lumps of iron. Stop panicking, take out your wands, and destroy them." Under her command, the Death Eaters quickly regrouped. They launched a coordinated assault, with magical spells crisscrossing the room, creating a dense web of magic. Although many golems were struck, they seemed largely unaffected, merely shuddering under the impact. In response to Rudolphus's aggressive attack, another iron golem raised its enchanted shield, glowing faintly, which effectively blocked the fiery onslaught, rendering his efforts futile. Despite their inability to significantly damage the iron golems, the Death Eaters managed to contain their surprise attacks, gradually restoring order to the chaos. The battle reached a deadlock, with both sides searching for an opening. Ron, observing from a high platform, watched the intense battle unfold below. Lupin, standing beside him, eyed Ron with suspicion, puzzled by his composure. He remembered Ron's earlier struggles with a boggart in Defense Against the Dark Arts class, and wondered, when did Ron become so composed? Lupin noted that Ron's spellcasting seemed far more proficient than he remembered, which raised his guard. He was about to voice his concerns when Ron turned, his gaze carrying a warning. Silently, Ron placed a finger to his lips, signaling Lupin to remain quiet. Lupin complied, though his mind was filled with questions. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shattered the silence. A section of the wall burst open, and a massive hand emerged, snatching a Death Eater with lightning speed. The unfortunate Death Eater, visible only from the head and calves, screamed in terror, his legs flailing helplessly. In a swift upward jerk, the giant hand tightened its grip, changing its trajectory. A brief, agonizing scream filled the air, followed by the sound of bones crushing. The Death Eater's body was grotesquely distorted under the immense pressure, with blood and internal organs spewing from his orifices. Amidst the chaos, shattered bricks, blood, and torn flesh painted a gruesome scene, scattering in all directions. An eyeball flew out and bounced off a Death Eater's body. The Death Eater screamed in terror, jumping to his feet and throwing it away with trembling hands as if it were a hot potato. The giant palm then shook off the bloody mud and slowly withdrew. The Death Eaters in the room turned away from the wall in terror, fearing they might be the next victims. Under the loud command of Garyhose, a group of Death Eaters raised their wands, aiming at the spot where the wall had just cracked, ready for the next round of attacks. Suddenly, another deafening thud pierced the night sky, and the hole in the wall was torn wider, as if a raging beast was struggling to escape. An earthy yellow giant, dressed in black leather, carefully crouched and began to move out of the hole. His movements were clumsy and slow, causing the room to tremble with every step. At that moment, a cunning green light flashed from the darkness and struck the giant's body. The giant staggered, its huge head shaking like a heavy stone swaying in the wind. This shaking caused the remaining masonry on the walls to rain down, crashing against the floor with a crisp sound. The giant roared angrily, the sound echoing through the room like thunder, his massive palms clutching the walls on either side to steady his crumbling form. Then he crushed the brick in his hand with all his might, scattering the shards everywhere, as if to vent his anger and strength. The Death Eater, who had dared to attack, took a few steps back, his face pale as he looked at the formidable giant in disbelief. He couldn't believe his eyes. The giant had ignored his killing curse, and the deadly spell had no effect on him. The earthy yellow giant continued to crawl his way into the room, but his size made it a laborious task to get through such a narrow hole. His movements became slower and slower, each accompanied by a thumping and popping sound, as if he were in the midst of a hard-fought battle. At the same time, similar noises were heard from several other directions in the circular room. Fragments of masonry flew everywhere, and smoke filled the air, making the room hazy and mysterious. As the dust settled, several burly figures, wearing the same costumes as the earthy yellow giant, appeared in the room. However, what terrified the Death Eaters even more was the familiar sound of leather boots on the ground behind them as the giants entered. As the smoke cleared, the uniformed, sleek-looking new aurors entered the room. Their arrival undoubtedly brought new variables to a battle that had been locked in a stalemate. At the same time, as if following some sort of command, the Iron Golems gave up their confrontation with the Death Eaters and retreated in unison. They came to the aurors, forming an impregnable line. With them there, the aurors could cast their magic without fear and devote all their energy to the battle. This scene terrified the Death Eaters present, reminding them of that unfortunate night when, faced with such a tight formation, they were finally defeated. Through the cracked walls, the Death Eaters in the Hall of Death finally saw the situation clearly. The walls were densely surrounded by aurors in new uniforms, their eyes determined and ready for battle. And behind these aurors stood a group of bald-headed, black-clad, earth-yellow giants. Although they stood still, the terrifying aura emanating from their bodies was intimidating. Clearly, these aurors hadn't come here on an ad hoc basis. They had been lying in ambush for a long time, just to strike a fatal blow to the Death Eaters at this moment. And the giants proved that they had been premeditated and well prepared. The Death Eaters were surrounded and had no means of escape. The Death Eaters who had escaped the raid fled to the relative safety of the middle floor. They clenched their wands, staring nervously around them, aware that the battle had taken a turn for the worse. As the influx of aurors arrived, their faces hidden behind masks, the tension in their posture was unmistakable. The clenched wands and the pronounced green veins on the backs of their hands betrayed their inner turmoil. Kingsley Shacklebolt couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief at this sight. He was well aware that the reformed auror's strength was formidable. Although his current responsibilities were primarily in covert operations, he had always been confident about the outcome of this confrontation. The Death Eaters, he knew, would not escape justice this time. The aurors were clearly well prepared for today's confrontation. It seemed that the members of the Ministry of Magic, particularly those aligned with the Gianna faction, had meticulously planned this operation without informing outsiders. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin shared a glance, feeling a weight lift from their shoulders. With the arrival of the Aurors, they no longer had to worry about being separated from their godson, Harry, fearing for his safety and well-being. Meanwhile, Professor McGonagall faced Bellatrix Lestrange with a slight smirk. Confronted by overwhelming opposition, even Bellatrix was forced to curb her arrogance. She abandoned her duel with McGonagall and fled, joining her fellow Death Eaters. As she ran, Bellatrix brushed her fingers through her disheveled hair, tucking it behind her ears in a futile attempt to calm her nerves. At that moment, Nymphadora Tonks's voice resonated throughout the room, amplified by magical acoustics to create an echoing effect. Listen, everyone inside. You are surrounded. Whether you're a Death Eater, a Hogwarts professor, or a Ministry official, you've all been arrested for trespassing in the Ministry's restricted area after hours. Her announcement reverberated, making it seem as though countless voices were speaking in unison. Following her declaration, the Aurors sprang into action. They moved swiftly around the circular room, their wands tracing intricate patterns on the ground. These patterns glowed with a soft blue light, creating a magical barrier that sealed the room, ensuring no one could escape. Chapter 628. Damn, they're setting up the anti-phantom shifting circle, a Death Eater exclaimed in a gruff voice, tinged with unease and trepidation. They failed to recognize the space anchor and mistook all spells capable of suppressing teleportation for the headache-inducing anti-phantom shifting circle. His words ignited the anxiety within the hearts of the Death Eaters like a spark in a haystack, causing everyone to become restless and nervously scout for an escape route. Lucius Malfoy, standing beside Gary Haas Greengrass, couldn't help but curse under his breath. It's a trap. Meanwhile, Rudolphus, positioned on the other side, also yelled angrily, "Can't let them finish." Before he could complete his sentence, a death curse shot out from the tip of his wand with fierce momentum and deadly intent. This death curse acted as a signal, instantly triggering the Death Eaters' counterattack. Their spells bombarded the Aurors, accompanied by the roars of giants, the cries of the wounded, and the crackling of spells. The entire area was engulfed in pillars of light of various colors, turning the scene into chaos. The members of the Order of the Phoenix on the high platform breathed a sigh of relief upon witnessing this scene. However, their relief was not complete. They had noticed Tonks's earlier statement and still harbored an inexplicable panic in their hearts, unaware that the Aurors intended to arrest them alongside the Death Eaters. "What shall we do?" Lupin asked Ethan, his eyes filled with confusion and helplessness. Moody's face contorted even more. His eyes widened as he said viciously, "Ignore it. The Ministry of Magic isn't solely controlled by Gianna and the Grimm family. If those Aurors dare to act against us, we'll fight back. Let them witness the strength of our Order of the Phoenix." His voice carried a mix of determination and madness, signaling his readiness for the worst. The members of the Order of the Phoenix nodded, raising their wands with solemn expressions, all except for Harry. He lifted his head, his gaze cutting through the chaos, and fixed on Ron on the high platform. Ron stood calmly, seemingly detached from the turmoil. He glanced at the members of the Order of the Phoenix and said lightly, "If you don't want to cause Dumbledore more trouble, it's best not to act rashly." Lupin frowned and looked at Ron quizzically. He had guessed Ron's true identity, but was puzzled by his intentions. Ron seemed to read Lupin's thoughts, raising his arm and pointing to a few corners in the sky. Following his gesture, Lupin was shocked to see several arcane eyes spinning silently, recording everything on the field. "Though your purpose is not to do evil, the law remains the law," Ron's voice echoed, clear and firm. "Just because you, the Order of the Phoenix, claim to be righteous doesn't justify breaking into the Department of Mysteries and flouting the law. This is not Hogwarts. There are no lenient school rules here, and every illegal act will be recorded by the Secret Eye." He paused, glanced at Professor McGonagall, and continued in a somewhat mischievous tone. "Given that the footage is generally favorable to you, I believe the Department of Magical Law Enforcement will consider this during the trial. You're not going to face 6 months in prison like Storgy Podmore. At best, you might spend 2 or 3 days in jail, followed by a public review. But his tone shifted abruptly, becoming extremely serious. If you dare to attack the Aurors, the consequences will be entirely different. Moody pulled Lupin behind him and eyed Ron with suspicion. He slammed his cane down and demanded, "You're not a Weasley kid." Before the impostor could respond, a chilling, high-pitched voice cut through the air, interrupting their conversation. It was terrifying, reminiscent of a ghost in the night, filled with murderous intent, as if a venomous snake was hissing vile words. "A bunch of waste. Why have I waited so long? Avada!" A green light sliced through the darkness, striking a giant in the chest with deadly precision. Moments before, the giant had seemed invincible, wielding a large baton and effortlessly crushing 2 Death Eaters, bravely repelling countless spells. However, the moment the spell hit, the once formidable giant fell to the ground, his roar silenced, dead without a sound. Immediately after, malevolent flames erupted from the ground, attacking the Auror team who were setting up the dimensional anchor. The sudden inferno caused chaos among the Aurors. Despite their training, allowing them to cast advanced disarming magic to fend off the flames before they could morph into monstrous forms, 2 Aurors, a steel golem, and 2 Death Eaters caught too close perished in the blaze. This attack halted the Aurors' efforts to establish the dimensional anchor temporarily. The appearance of this formidable adversary significantly shifted the battle's dynamics. His ruthless and precise attacks made it clear he was a force to be reckoned with. All eyes turned to this mysterious figure, eager to unveil his identity. Emerging from the shadows was a tall, thin figure clad in a black hood, his face ghastly pale and haggard, with a flat nose and slit-like nostrils, unmistakably the Dark Lord Voldemort. The Aurors, well versed in Voldemort's appearance, thanks to Tonk's inside information, and the Order of the Phoenix, long vigilant against him, recognized him instantly. Despite widespread disbelief in Voldemort's return, his presence sent a wave of recognition and tension through the room. Voldemort appeared at the room's center through apparition shifting, suspended in mid-air, surrounded by thick black smoke that seemed to birth a demon from the darkness. His black robes blended with the smoke, and he hovered just above Bellatrix, who gazed up at him with fanatic adoration, barely restraining herself from kissing his pale, oddly shaped feet. "You fools!" Voldemort bellowed, his voice terrifying. "Don't you see that their fur coats are made of horned camels?" "Master, I did my best, I did my best!" Bellatrix cried out in fear, her voice trembling with dread and supplication. "Quiet, Bella!" Voldemort snapped, cutting her off coldly. "Do you think I've come here to listen to your excuses?" His red, snake-like eyes focused on the prophecy ball in Ron's hand. With a slender, spider-like finger, he gestured with his wand, and a bright light pierced the darkness, forcing the wizards to shield their eyes. The Death Eaters cleared a path for Voldemort, marking his dominance on the battlefield. The expressions on their faces were filled with awe and fanaticism, as if they were welcoming the arrival of gods. Nearby, both Aurors and Death Eaters involuntarily ceased their spells, watching in amazement as Voldemort descended onto the steps. With each step, it seemed as though he was stepping directly onto the hearts of everyone present. His majestic posture resembled that of a king surveying his domain, leaving no room for frivolity or haste. The Death Eaters, their morale soaring at the sight of their master, displayed their fanaticism openly. Bellatrix's eyes shone with an even more undisguised fervor, while Rudolphus cast a malicious glance at the Aurors. In their eyes, these Aurors were mere paper tigers before the might of their absolute power. The fact that the Death Eaters outnumbered the Aurors, who had prepared in advance, seemed to solidify their advantage. Moreover, the absence of Dumbledore, the Dark Lord's greatest adversary, only added to their confidence. The tense atmosphere was suddenly shattered by the sound of clapping. Ron, standing on a high platform, clapped his hands mockingly. "What a splendid levitation charm, far superior to those of the students," he said. Voldemort halted, fixing Ron with his snake-like gaze. A smile of interest crossed his face before he slowly inquired, "The poor boy from the Weasley family lacks both courage and knowledge. Who might you be?" The members of the Order of the Phoenix, not far from Ron, were shocked to witness a dramatic transformation. As the mysterious man spoke, Ron's features began to contort as if molded by hot wax, twisting and deforming under the gaze of all. An invisible force seemed to stretch him taller, and his fiery red hair darkened to the deep black of night. The freckles that once dotted his skin vanished, revealing a new, smooth, and fair complexion beneath. In an instant, the Ron they knew, with his Celtic features, had vanished without a trace, replaced by the figure of a man from the Dragon Country, Ethan Green. Chapter 629. Everyone watched as Ron stood in his place, elegantly combing his jet-black hair. His fingers moved with a magical luster, shaping his hair into a more mature style. This transformation left the wizards present in awe, their jaws dropping at the sight of what seemed like a magical miracle. "It's you, Ethan. Your shape-shifting abilities are truly outstanding. You managed to transform yourself into another person without using a polyjuice potion, and the effect lasted so long." A flash of appreciation appeared in Voldemort's eyes, and his voice carried undisguised approval. "This ability is indeed breathtaking." He paused, then continued, "You've gone to great lengths to disguise yourself as a Weasley and come here in person, certainly not to deal with my less successful followers. They're not worth your trouble." At this, Voldemort fell into deep thought, speculating about Ethan's true purpose, seemingly oblivious to the Death Eater's discomfort. "So, your goal is me?" Voldemort looked up, trying to discern Ethan's intentions. "Forgive me for being a little rude." Ethan smiled slightly, raised his right hand, and with a gesture of calmness, pointed to his school uniform, which looked ill-fitting due to the transformation. Without waiting for a response, he began to cast a transfiguration charm, as casually as if he were dealing with an ordinary person, not the Dark Lord himself. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the uniform magically adjusted in shape and size, eventually fitting Ethan perfectly. He then addressed Voldemort with a natural tone, as if speaking to an old friend. "You're right. I did transform into that annoying red-haired kid through transfiguration. After all, I don't want to drink something with Weasley hair." He continued, "Also, I followed Harry Potter through those rooms, not just to avoid arousing the suspicion of your men. Their illusion charm is a bit clumsy. My goal was not to assist the Ministry of Magic in capturing these Death Eaters." As he spoke, Ethan's school uniform transformed into a combat trench coat, clinging to his figure and highlighting his vigor and strength. He stared at Voldemort with a determined gaze and continued, "I just wanted to have a fair one-on-one duel with you, Mr. Tom Riddle." The members of the Order of the Phoenix were on high alert, wands at the ready. However, Ethan's words took them by surprise, causing them to turn their heads in astonishment. Professor McGonagall was the first to react, her eyes widening as she exclaimed, "Nonsense! Ethan, facing dark forces is not something a child like you should do alone. I have already informed Dumbledore, as long as we stand together." Before she could finish, Moody interrupted her. "Leave the boy alone, Minerva," the experienced Auror said with a glare and a tone full of discontent. "If he's going to face his fate, let him." Moody had developed a deep prejudice against Ethan and his friends after a series of events last year. He doubted Ethan's ability to confront Voldemort and even thought he was just causing trouble. Lupin glanced at Sirius, who was guarding Harry, then turned to Ethan with a worried look. "Ethan, perhaps," he began, but Ethan stopped him with a gentle wave of his hand. "Thank you for your concern, but it seems you're relying too much on Dumbledore's protection." Ethan shook his head seriously, signaling his determination to face Voldemort alone. Ethan always believed that Dumbledore wasn't the only one capable of solving everything. The world would still function without him. He wanted to demonstrate to the wizarding world that the power to save it didn't solely reside in the hands of the most renowned white wizards. After expressing his thoughts, Ethan surveyed the members of the Order of the Phoenix gathered on the high platform and spoke with authority. "Please, leave this place and proceed to those steps to observe the battle. Your involvement here would only hinder my duel with Mr. Riddle and serve no other purpose." Voldemort, who had been listening quietly to Ethan's words, showed a rare sign of respect in his tone, as if he were addressing a worthy adversary. He elegantly dismissed the Order members who attempted to speak and focused solely on Ethan. "Ethan, I have a question," Voldemort said, prompting Ethan to face him. Ethan nodded slightly, signaling for Voldemort to proceed. "If I'm not mistaken, you've been searching for Tom Riddle. What does that have to do with me, Voldemort? He asked with a peculiar smile, then quickly adopted a serious demeanor. My name is Voldemort. Please refrain from using that muggle's last name. Rejecting his past identity, Voldemort attempted to entice Ethan, speaking as if to a long-lost friend. Ethan, if I recall correctly, you also emerged from an orphanage, right? Don't you see the remarkable similarities between us? Perhaps you, too, are a descendant of a noble bloodline. He then extended an offer. Join me, young wizard. Your talent is astonishing, and I believe you possess great potential. Align with me, hand over the prophecy orb, and become a member of the Death Eaters. I assure you, your friends will remain unharmed. Whether it's the British Ministry of Magic or Hogwarts, you could have control. It seems you don't hold much regard for Dumbledore either. Interestingly, he also had red hair in his youth, much like yours now. Ethan, however, remained unswayed. He firmly held his wand, his eyes alight with unwavering resolve. I must correct you, Mr. Voldemort. I am here with a singular purpose, to kill you or to be killed by you. Voldemort observed the intense determination in Ethan's eyes and felt a pang of regret. He sighed, then turned to the Order of the Phoenix members. Very well, Dumbledore's minions. Make way. Once I defeat Ethan, you'll be next. Ethan's voice carried a commanding tone as he addressed the Order. Please proceed quickly, and refrain from interfering with my duel with Mr. Voldemort. His gaze swept over the Order members, his instructions clear. Shackle, as an Auror, you should understand the importance of following orders. Lupin, please escort Professor McGonagall away. Sirius, there's no need for that worried expression. Take Harry with you. He then paused, his eyes settling on the battle-scarred former Auror. And Moody, if you choose to stay and obstruct, that's your decision. But be warned, within moments, you could be obliterated. Don't expect any sympathy from me. Ethan's words stirred a mix of shock and indignation among the Order members. However, they recognized the seriousness of his intent. Ethan was more powerful than any of them and was evidently prepared to confront Voldemort in a life-or-death battle. Moody, with a cold snort, slammed his crutch against the ground, acknowledging Ethan's warning without a word. Wanted to say a few sarcastic words to Ethan, but Shackle grabbed him and forcibly removed him from the high platform. Although Shackle was also displeased with Ethan's behavior, he understood his responsibilities well. As an Auror of the Ministry of Magic, he had to follow orders, even if they came from a young man who was not a Ministry employee, and he recognized that the situation was beyond their control. Nearby, his immediate superior, Nymphadora Tonks, had already instructed the other Aurors to clear a path for the impending duel. Professor McGonagall pursed her lips, her expression complex. In her eyes, Ethan was not just a former Hogwarts student, but also a professor of arcane magic, and he was stronger than the members of the Order of the Phoenix. However, no matter his achievements, she still saw him as a young wizard who had yet to graduate. In her view, she couldn't just stand by and watch one of her students engage in a duel with a mysterious man, especially when she was his professor. Green. McGonagall attempted to persuade him once more, but Lupin placed a hand on her shoulder. He shook his head slightly, signaling her to refrain from speaking further. Then, he led her forcefully off the high platform and towards the distant steps. Well, Ethan, since you were so insistent. Sirius gave Ethan a meaningful look, then decisively pulled a reluctant Harry away from the platform. He reached out, gently covering Harry's mouth to silence him, to avoid drawing Voldemort's attention. In Sirius's mind, Harry's safety was paramount, and he would never allow his godson to face any danger. Chapter 630. After everyone in the way had left, Voldemort gracefully drew a semicircle in the air with his wand, signaling the invitation to begin the duel. However, Ethan Green held out his palm and motioned for him to wait. What's the problem? Voldemort's brow furrowed, his voice laced with obvious impatience, yet he managed to restrain his anger and slowly lowered his wand. As a half-blooded Dark Lord, Voldemort's obsession with pure-blood supremacy was almost fanatical. He believed that only purebloods were the noblest of beings, a conviction deeply embedded in his heart. Consequently, he still adhered to the social etiquette of traditional pureblood families, especially regarding something as solemn as a duel, but only with opponents he deemed worthy. His patience with Ethan was a rare occurrence. Ethan pointed to the members of the Order of the Phoenix, who were standing between the arch platform and the steps, and announced, "I said, ascend the steps and refrain from interfering with this duel." Voldemort's noseless face slightly tilted. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, a gesture of his simmering displeasure and anger, yet he chose to endure. Once the Order of the Phoenix had moved to the steps, Ethan waved his wand under Voldemort's watchful eye. Muttering a spell, the tip of his wand burst into a dazzling light. He turned sharply, his black coat billowing out like a meteor's tail. A powerful stream of magical energy surged from his wand, swiftly forming a huge circle of blue flames around the high platform. The blue flame, alive and writhing, traced the circular concave ground between the steps and the round arch platform, resembling a roaring blue dragon. This mysterious wall of blue fire enclosed the area, creating a dueling arena exclusively for Ethan and Voldemort. A Death Eater, caught off guard by the blue flames, screamed in horror as his body was instantly reduced to ashes by the fierce blaze. Ethan glanced indifferently at the drifting ashes and flicked them away, erasing the last trace of the Death Eater from the world. "Now, we can ensure no interruptions," he stated. "Heh, Green, you're here to protect those students, aren't you?" Voldemort sneered, his gaze sharp as a serpent's, focusing on Ginny, who was not far away. The young wizards were concealed in the circular parapet passage beneath the steps, and the blue flames Ethan had cast severed their connection to the outside world, forming an impenetrable barrier. Voldemort's wand slowly rose, its tip aimed at Ginny's hiding spot, his voice menacing. "I know where they are, Green. If you don't surrender, I'll kill you first, then claim their souls one by one." In the midst of the tension, two Death Eaters exchanged glances and nodded, planning to fly over the steps to the opposite side for better support. Transforming into black smoke, they attempted to cross the barrier of blue flames. However, their efforts were in vain. As they neared the flames, a blue flame, swift and fierce as an eel, struck them with lightning speed. The black smoke ignited, burning away without a trace. Ethan glanced at the falling ashes with a flash of disdain on his face, unfazed by Voldemort's threat. He challenged in a defiant tone, "I'm ready. Let's start now. If you still wish to adhere to that ridiculous duel ritual, I'm more than prepared to oblige." Upon hearing this, Voldemort felt an inexplicable sense of shame rising within him. In his heart, he had always strived to maintain a demeanor of politeness. Ethan, however, had acted in ways that completely disregarded the pride of purebloods. He treated duel etiquette as a mere joke, utterly crushing his opponent's pride underfoot. Annoyed, the tip of Voldemort's wand instantly lit up with a green glow, signaling his readiness to launch a deadly attack. Ethan, undeterred, gathered magical energy in 7 colors at the tip of his wand, creating a dazzling rainbow brilliance. In the Ministry of Magic's monitoring room, countless large display screens covered the walls, each showing live scenes from very corner of the ministry. At this moment, the largest screen in the center displayed the intense battle unfolding in the Hall of Death. "Is it all right? Is it all right?" Cirilla, who had been leaning against the doorframe, suddenly stood up straight, pacing anxiously. Her eyes were glued to the screen, afraid to miss any crucial moment. Beside her, Hermione, Jiangchu, and Penelope were equally fixated on the screen. Following Ethan's instructions, they had been temporarily restricted from moving, staying vigilant in case Voldemort attempted a surprise attack. Gianna observed the anxious girls and finally nodded. In the next moment, Cirilla was the first to dash out the door, disappearing in a flash of blue light. "Damn, why don't I have that talent?" Hermione muttered enviously, watching the spot where Cirilla had vanished. As a descendant of ancient wizarding blood, Cirilla's use of space-time spells was as natural as breathing, a skill unmatched by anyone else. The other girls reluctantly used teleportation spells to exit the monitoring room. "Protect them," Gianna instructed Onyxia, standing beside her. She knew that Onyxia, a formidable female black dragon, was the most powerful among them, aside from Ethan, provided he lifted the restrictions. Onyxia nodded and left the monitoring room as well. In the monitoring room, besides Gianna, another significant figure was present, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic. However, Fudge's demeanor was a stark contrast to Gianna's composed and authoritative presence. Overwhelmed by the news of Voldemort's return, Fudge was engulfed in panic, as if all his defenses had crumbled. Sweat beaded on his bald head, but he seemed oblivious to it, his lips moving silently in distress, muttering, it's over, he's really back." The Ministry employees witnessing this scene instantly lost all respect for Fudge. The stark difference in leadership between Gianna and Fudge was evident, and they quickly aligned themselves with Gianna's commands, virtually ignoring Fudge. After issuing a series of orders, Gianna turned her attention to Fudge. She no longer bothered to disguise her disdain or maintain a respectful attitude towards her superior. Leaning forward, her arms propped on her desk, she fixed Fudge with a sharp gaze that cut through his panic and fear. "Cornelius, I'll give you a chance to resign," Gianna said coldly. "For the sake of our past relationship, I won't hold you accountable as I did with Crouch." Fudge looked up in astonishment, disbelief in his eyes. "What do you mean by that, Gianna?" he stammered, finally grasping the gravity of the situation, his voice trembling. It was only at that moment that Fudge snapped out of his reverie, realizing that Ethan and Gianna had been aware of Voldemort's return all along. Their previous ambiguous stance was merely a strategy to pit him against Dumbledore. The realization that he had been left in the dark filled Fudge with an indescribable sense of anger and frustration. Connolly! Lady Gianna Proudmoore's voice rang out, tinged with disappointment and anger. "Your crime isn't merely hiding the truth about Voldemort's return. It goes far beyond neglect of duty. You'd better see for yourself." As she spoke, she inserted a disc into the playback device and fixed Fudge with a cold stare. The disc began to spin slowly, and the image on the screen gradually sharpened. It had been provided by Hermione and captured a series of Umbridge's transgressions. Fudge's face drained of color as he watched, dumbfounded. The footage showed Umbridge confessing to releasing the Dementors, using an unforgivable curse on Harry, and her readiness to disclose that Fudge had deliberately chosen to ignore these facts. I didn't know. I never ordered these actions," Fudge stammered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. Despite being aware of Umbridge's activities, he had never explicitly directed her to employ such extreme and underhanded tactics. As the Minister of Magic, how could he personally stoop to such despicable acts? Chapter 631. At this moment, witnessing Umbridge's smug expression on the screen, Fudge's fury reached its zenith. If Umbridge were before him now, he found himself wishing to personally cast an unforgivable curse at her. What could possibly be going through the mind of such a deranged woman? Observing Cornelius Fudge's visage, twisted in shock and rage, Miss Gianna Proudmoore crossed her arms and spoke with calm authority. "As a former colleague, deep down, I want to believe in your innocence. However, in the eyes of the wizarding world, especially after Voldemort's return has been witnessed by all, that belief is hard to maintain. Umbridge has always been seen as your ally, and her actions inevitably reflect back on you." Gianna paused, her voice softening as she continued. "Cornelius, it's time for a decision. Voluntarily relinquish your power and encourage your followers to do the same. In doing so, I can ensure you leave with dignity, avoiding the disgrace that befell Barty Crouch. I offer you this chance because I genuinely believe you wouldn't instruct Umbridge to carry out those deeds. You may be somewhat obtuse, but I don't see you as inherently evil." Meanwhile, the halls of the Department of Mysteries were engulfed in chaos. Spells of every hue crisscrossed the air, weaving a complex tapestry of magic. Amidst the cacophony of roars, cries of pain, the thunderous steps of giants, and the clanking of the iron golem's joints, a furious symphony was born. Yet, amidst this tumultuous storm, nothing was more captivating than the arched platform at the center of the Hall of Death. Once a site for executions, it now served as the arena for a pivotal duel. Encircled by bright blue flames that threatened to consume everything, two formidable magical forces clashed within, obscuring the battle between Ethan and Voldemort. The Aurors and Death Eaters found themselves irresistibly drawn to the duel between these formidable wizards. Despite the risk of distraction leading to death, their curiosity was magnetically pulled towards the fiery confrontation. The outcome of this duel was pivotal, overshadowing the broader conflict. Though the magical flames obscured the specifics of their battle, the sheer intensity of the magical energy spilling forth spoke volumes about its ferocity. Periodically, the green light of the Avada Kedavra curse pierced the surrounding darkness, while a spectrum of light danced around, and the sound of a silver shield resonated as if in encouragement of the combatants. The area was littered with the bodies of those unfortunate enough to be caught in the crossfire, their demise made all the more tragic by the backdrop of flames. Only the most daring and skilled wizards would attempt to approach this electrifying duel. Bellatrix Lestrange was among them. Her eyes alight with madness and anticipation, she wielded her magic whip with lethal precision, striking at aurors who dared to challenge her. Each time her whip ensnared an auror, she couldn't resist glancing back at the platform, where her master engaged in a fierce battle. With a cruel smile playing on her lips, she yanked her whip back, sending the ensnared auror flying into the air, creating a gruesome spectacle as they collided with a Death Eater also aloft. Ethan looked in the direction of the other unfortunate target and saw a female auror in uniform, her short silver-gray hair styled in a shawl cut, standing tall on the opposite step. The woman sheathed her silver sword, which transformed back into a wand, and their gazes clashed with intensity in the air. Bellatrix observed the other's proud posture and felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity surge within her. Her whip morphed back into a wand, and with a swift flick to the right, a green light flashed, causing a burly, prime-aged auror to fall silently to the ground. However, she was taken aback to see that the female auror's movements were as precise as her own, and even more, the auror was slightly faster despite acting later. Almost immediately after Bellatrix's spell hit the roar, the woman appeared next to another Death Eater. Her wand, now a sword again, effortlessly penetrated the Death Eater's defenses, cleaving him in two. Witnessing the young auror's fluid movements, Bellatrix felt an inexplicable thrill. She hadn't anticipated encountering such a formidable opponent among the aurors. This newfound excitement ignited her combativeness like a blazing inferno. With a sneer in her childlike feigned voice, she taunted, "Aha! Come down and play, little girl." The auror seemed to have anticipated her challenge. Without hesitation, she stuck out her tongue and lightly licked her lips, as if relishing the impending battle, and then took a determined step forward. She was flanked by 3 companions, one in the same auror uniform with waist-length tan hair, and the other 2, a girl with thick brown hair and bright brown eyes, and another with long, straight black hair and a distinctly draconic appearance, both in Hogwarts uniforms. All 3 attempted to dissuade the impulsive auror from advancing. However, as if deaf to their pleas, she stepped over the steps and the corpses strewn across the ground, moving directly towards Bellatrix. Though the 2 sides were still distant and had yet to engage directly, the tension in the air was palpable, hinting at the intensity of their silent confrontation. Each time Bellatrix cast a spell to kill an auror, the female auror, Cyrilla, would retaliate by dispatching a Death Eater in kind. A silent contest unfolded between them, each seeking to outdo the other's prowess. Eventually, Bellatrix could no longer contain her anxiety. She lashed out with her magic whip, sweeping an auror off his feet. Then, with the silver alchemical prosthetic hand given to her by Voldemort, she tightly grasped the auror's throat. As she unleashed the power of the prosthetic, the auror's life force rapidly drained away, leaving behind a shriveled corpse, akin to a mummy weathered by years. Cyrilla, undeterred, her eyes alight with excitement, imbued her arcane sword with the magic of Vampire's touch. In an instant, she appeared beside a Death Eater, her sword swinging. The blood and life force of the Death Eater were swiftly absorbed by the silver sword, flowing steadily into Cyrilla's body. The Death Eater turned into a shriveled corpse, which Cyrilla nonchalantly tossed aside, turning into a pile of dust that dissipated into the air. This spectacle mirrored Bellatrix's own actions. Laughing excitedly, Bellatrix attacked with her magic whip, eagerly anticipating Cyrilla's approach. She realized the source of their familiarity. The joy in Cyrilla's eyes during battle mirrored the bloodthirsty desire in her own heart, as if she had found a kindred spirit. Yet, what astonished her even more was their shared fanatical gaze when they looked towards the archway, revealing that the female auror was indeed a kindred spirit. Voldemort and Cirilla were both deeply passionate about their causes, making their confrontation even more fierce. Cirilla, a formidable female Auror, recognized her opponent's identity from the outset. This realization unleashed her pent-up fighting spirit, which had been building for over half a year. She was aware that Bellatrix was married to Rudolphus, as per the Ministry of Magic's records, but she could see in her adversary's eyes that the person they cherished most was engaged in a duel with her beloved at the Arch. This revelation bolstered Cirilla's resolve to prove who was the stronger of the two. Consequently, Cirilla disregarded Ethan's repeated warnings and left Penelope, Hermione, and Jiangchu behind, choosing to confront the battle alone, without the support of another Auror or an employee from the Arcane United Company. There's nothing more exhilarating and romantic than this. Though unspoken, their hearts were in sync at that moment. As they dueled, the intensity of their loved one's battle seemed to fuel their own. Amidst the backdrop of blue flames, spells intertwined and collided, unleashing a torrent of magical power. The resulting cacophony of shattering sounds filled the hall, momentarily drowning out all other noise and emphasizing the magnitude of the confrontation. The platform trembled under the fierce duel between Ethan and Voldemort, two of the most powerful wizards in the world, struggling to withstand the force of their magic. Both combatants fought to maintain their footing, each movement a testament to their determination not to yield. Meanwhile, the three illusions Ethan conjured with the mirror technique struggled to remain intact, mirroring the battle's intensity. Despite not being destroyed by Voldemort, they wavered as if barely able to sustain themselves in such a high-stakes fight. The ground's tremors grew increasingly violent, with cracks spreading across the stone and rubble flying in all directions. Yet, amidst the chaos, the Arch stood firm, almost as if it were the true sovereign of the Hall of Death, unyielding and majestic in the turmoil. This depiction of Cirilla's and Ethan's battles highlights the depth of their commitment and the lengths they are willing to go for those they love, setting the stage for a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of love amidst the darkest of times. Chapter 632. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan's incantation echoed throughout the hall. With each swing of his wand, a large oval dotted line materialized in the air. Flames ignited and spread rapidly along this line, eventually forming a towering portal of fire on the high platform. The portal radiated a fiery glow, seemingly connecting to a realm teeming with fire elementals. Although Voldemort was highly skilled in dark magic, he had not delved into the study of arcane magic as Ethan had. Nevertheless, he possessed enough knowledge to sense the formidable force emanating from the portal. The power surging from it surpassed even the powerful black tentacles Ethan had summoned earlier. The portal's ability to tear through space, coupled with the intense aura of fire elementals, made Voldemort realize that Ethan was about to summon a formidable fire elemental creature. Voldemort's face momentarily betrayed a hint of solemnity, yet he remained composed. He refrained from attempting to destroy Ethan's remaining projections, aware that luck might not always favor him, and he couldn't gamble on the chance of striking Ethan's true form. Preparing for the impending attack, Voldemort conjured a new silver shield out of thin air and surrounded himself with several layers of super-powerful iron armor spells to withstand the fierce onslaught of the fire elemental creature. As he fortified his defenses, a colossal figure emerged from the archway. The creature's appearance dredged up Voldemort's childhood nightmares from his time in the orphanage. Its body, seemingly carved from flowing lava, glowed with an orange-red fire, giving the impression it was enveloped in untamed flames. The creature stood tall and muscular, its physique reminiscent of anvils forged in fire, robust and potent. Its broad shoulders seemed to harbor the power of endless flames, poised to reduce everything to ashes. A crown of blazing flames encircled its head, majestic and enigmatic, with flames that danced wildly one moment and burned steadily the next, as if protecting a slumbering inferno. The creature's eyes shone brightly under the flames, resembling two glowing coals, deep and resolute, showcasing its mastery over fire. The fire elemental lord's arms were thick and long, akin to iron pillars tempered in flames, radiating fiery energy. Its hands were large, with fingers strong as iron clamps, each joint brimming with the endless power of fire. Its legs, sturdy as stone pillars supporting a volcano, shook the ground and sparked flames with every step, heralding its arrival. The creature's attire, crafted from the essence of flames, radiated intense heat. A crimson cloak billowed behind it like a living flame, its edges adorned with fiery tongues that spat sparks, signaling its readiness for battle. Its breastplate, a solid shell of flames, protected its powerful heart while exuding a formidable presence. "Kill the noseless one." Ethan's voice, slightly sharper due to the tension, lost its usual gentleness. Since the world of Harry Potter is a parallel universe to the Blue Star and lacks a specific fire elemental plane, the fire elemental lord summoned by Ethan was not a true fire elemental being, but a newborn, shaped by spell magic. This limitation slightly reduced the fire elemental lord's combat capabilities, but ensured Ethan's absolute control over it. Under Ethan's command, the fire elemental lord charged at Voldemort like a tamed beast, determined to annihilate him once and for all. The incarnation of pure flame, the fire elemental lord, didn't need to walk. It floated across the shattered ground like a raging flame, heading straight for Voldemort. Voldemort's super-powerful iron charm shield proved fragile against the power of the flames, each shield barely lasting a few seconds before exploding in a burst of blue light. As the fire elemental lord approached, it raised its flaming hammer, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. The monster, made entirely of flames, not only possessed great power, but its fiery presence alone was enough to cause Voldemort unbearable pain. Standing beside the fire elemental lord, Voldemort felt as though he was engulfed in the flames of hell, every inch of his skin scorched by the intense heat. Fortunately, Voldemort had spent years transforming himself, creating a body most suitable for casting spells. This unique, noseless body endowed Voldemort with extraordinary magical resistance and endurance, allowing him to withstand the fiery pressure exerted by the fire elemental lord. However, Voldemort knew he couldn't confront this flame giant directly. Yet, he was not without resources. He remembered that it was Ethan who had summoned this helper through his summoning magic. In the arcane realm of magic, there exists a mysterious spell known as banishment, capable of easily returning creatures from the outer plane to their original worlds. Similarly, in the world of Harry Potter, there are spells with wonderful effects. A flash of inspiration reminded Voldemort of the perfect spell for this situation, the anti-summoning charm. Though slightly less effective than banishment, being cast by Voldemort himself lent it considerable power. Under the anti-summoning spell, the fire elemental lord's movements halted abruptly, and its body became illusory, as if on the verge of being expelled from this world. Seeing this, Ethan quickly intensified his summoning magic, striving to keep the fire elemental lord in this world to continue its mission. However, Voldemort, determined not to be outdone, cast a series of anti-summoning spells, aiming to send the fire elemental lord back to its original world. Thus, in the clash between these two powerful wizards, the fire elemental lord was caught in the middle, subjected to two opposing wills that left it in a dilemma. At this moment, both Ethan and Voldemort understood that their rivalry had escalated to a critical stage. They used their magic and will to maintain the standoff, all the while observing each other closely, searching for any vulnerability. The slightest action, a blink, a twitch of the lips, or a shake of the hands, could provide an opening for the other's attack. Consequently, both wizards stood as still as statues, motionless. Even Ethan's three mirrored apparitions seemed to be frozen in place. Ethan, with his profound understanding and talent, had reached a level of knowledge that could rival any wizard in this world. He was far more knowledgeable than Voldemort, who had largely been self-taught. Moreover, the fire elemental lord, derived from arcane magic and not the original magic of the Harry Potter world, presented a significant difference in summoning principles. Ethan, being a summoner, undoubtedly had an advantage. However, Voldemort was also an incredibly powerful wizard. Born in 1926, he had experienced 70 years of life's vicissitudes. Unlike Muggles, whose bodies begin to decay after 30, wizards' magic matures over time, growing more potent. Thus, the 70-year-old Voldemort had over 50 years of magical growth and accumulation, giving him a significant advantage over Ethan. To the underage Ethan, in terms of magic, Voldemort was slightly less skilled in this confrontation. However, he managed to leverage his profound magical abilities to restore balance to the battle. Meanwhile, outside the battlefield, the fight was intensifying. Bellatrix Lestrange's wand movements resembled a black viper, furiously slicing through the air. The magic whip she wielded produced a fierce wind sound as it was repeatedly slammed towards Cirilla. Despite the relentless assault, Cirilla remained composed. She tapped into the ancient bloodline's power, which granted her exceptional agility, allowing her to dodge every attack effortlessly. With each movement accompanied by a flash of silver light, she could vanish and reappear like a specter behind Bellatrix, launching devastating counterattacks. Although Bellatrix and Cirilla shared some personality traits, their differences were stark. Bellatrix, seasoned in the art of killing, relied heavily on instinct and the unrestrained use of dark magic. Her combat style, devoid of systematic training, was shaped by years of experience and intuition honed through countless battles. This approach made her attacks fierce but somewhat predictable and lacking in variety. In contrast, Cirilla's approach to combat was more comprehensive and adaptable. Not only was she young and physically robust, but she also underwent specialized training from both the Demon Hunter and the Ministry of Magic. After arriving in this world, she received personal guidance and specialized training from Ethan, mastering the intricacies of arcane magic. This diverse training equipped her with a wide range of techniques and strategies, enabling her to seamlessly switch between long-range attacks and close-quarters combat. This versatility left Bellatrix struggling to keep up. Chapters 6 and 33. As the battle progressed, Cirilla began to gain the upper hand. She constantly suppressed Bellatrix, forcing her into a defensive stance. The two wands emitted bright flashes, and the ground beneath their feet heated and cracked, testament to the intensity of their duel. Each clash was marked by a burst of energy and a shower of sparks, instilling fear in those who witnessed it. Over time, Cirilla's teleportation became increasingly frequent, her movements resembling a flickering silver light darting across the battlefield. Bellatrix's attempts to dodge grew more desperate. She was forced to abandon her offensive spells and cast several iron armor charms in quick succession just to deflect or evade Cirilla's attacks. Despite her precarious situation, Bellatrix's taunts remained sharp. "Ha ha! Do you love him very much, Aurora darling? Alas, the man you love is going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it." A trace of coldness flashed in Cirilla's eyes at Bellatrix's words. She responded with a contemptuous smirk. "Tut-tut, that's really unfortunate, old woman. It seems not only your appearance but your wit has aged as well." "Ha!" With a swift motion, Cirilla swung her sword, its sharp edge grazing Bellatrix's feet, narrowly missing inflicting a permanent injury. The magic imbued in the arcane sword erupted, causing the ground to crack even more. Bellatrix couldn't evade in time. Her cheeks were cut by flying debris, and dust covered her face, leaving her in a disheveled state. This sight elicited another round of laughter from Cirilla. Bellatrix, infuriated, tried to shake off the dust and gravel from her face. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating, hearing a girl's voice filled with mockery and contempt. Touching her cheek, now marred from years of torture in Azkaban, her eyes blazed with anger beneath her tangled curls. "You little whore, I'm going to disfigure your face and kill you. What does being young matter?" Bellatrix's voice, no longer feigning innocence, was filled with jealousy and rage. She yearned to inflict the Drillheart curse on Cirilla repeatedly, making her suffer endlessly. Despite nearly a year of recovery, Bellatrix had regained some of her former beauty, but still felt deeply insecure, especially when comparing herself to Cirilla and her companions. She wondered where Ethan had found so many talented and attractive allies. Cirilla, both skilled and beautiful, moved with the grace of a swallow, effortlessly evading Bellatrix's furious attacks. Observing Bellatrix's twisted expression, Cirilla taunted her from a position of superiority. "Then try it, Bellatrix. Unlike you, I'm not bound to anyone but my lover." Her tone was laden with contempt and disdain, treating Bellatrix as nothing more than a pitiful clown. This infuriated Bellatrix, who responded with a vicious curse, aiming to end Cirilla's life. "My master can kill him today!" Cyrilla, unfazed, deftly countered the curse. A mocking smile played on her lips as she recalled something amusing. You yourself admit that Ethan will marry me. Oh, it's you, Bellatrix. Your master cares so little for you, it seems you will always be overlooked. Ethan never treated me like that. He had nothing but endless tenderness and affection for me. Her words struck Bellatrix's heart like a sharp knife, awakening the long-suppressed yearning for love within the female Death Eater. The gap between the two women was closing, and Cyrilla was clearly gaining the upper hand. She launched a ferocious attack on Bellatrix, gradually cornering the crazed witch into the blue flames. Her smile turned savage, and her eyes sparkled with a grim light. She planned to use Ethan's flames to reduce the Death Eater witch before her to ashes. If Voldemort truly cared for Bellatrix, her demise would undoubtedly benefit Ethan in his duel. Cyrilla thought to herself as she intensified her assault. The mention of the mystery man hit Bellatrix's most vulnerable spot. Cyrilla's words cut through her like a sharp dagger, not only exposing her unspoken reluctance, but also igniting her intense jealousy towards Cyrilla. Bellatrix had once believed that she and Cyrilla were both pitiful souls, deceived by fate and cast into darkness. However, she now realized that their situations were vastly different. Cyrilla had met the love of her life at a young age, and they knew, loved, and supported each other. Even though he might have his flaws, in Bellatrix's eyes, this represented a warmth she longed for, but could never attain. She would have preferred Voldemort to be a man of many loves, rather than face his cold and unforgiving nature. Jealousy blazed within Bellatrix's heart like a wildfire. She finally understood why Cyrilla had spared her. The intention was to provoke her and deepen her anguish. In a mix of anger and humiliation, Bellatrix screamed uncontrollably, "Rudolphus, you fools, come and kill her!" Moments earlier, Rudolphus had effortlessly set an auror, petrified by Lucius, ablaze with fierce fire. The crackling flames and his laughter were particularly jarring. "Look at how green you are, just graduated, right?" Rudolphus mocked with a sneer, his eyes gleaming with cruel pride. "It's pathetic. You're about to witness yourself being burned alive." Despite the noisy and chaotic battlefield, Rudolphus, from dozens of meters away, was like a loyal hound, keenly attuned to his wife's cries. It was as if he had a sophisticated spectrum analyzer in his mind, allowing him to accurately pick out his wife's voice amidst the chaos. When he heard Bellatrix's cries for help, Rudolphus's face turned ashen. He quickly turned his head, his gaze cutting through the fog and confusion of the crowd, just in time to see his wife in the strange blue flames beside her. His heart sank, gripped by an invisible, tightening hand. "Bella, get away!" Rudolphus shouted hoarsely, his voice laden with fear and anxiety. "That blue flame is—" In his moment of distraction, the young auror, who had nearly been consumed by the flames, was swiftly rescued by his comrades. Simultaneously, an ice arrow shot past, narrowly missing Rudolphus's forearm. He felt a biting chill, and his arm was suddenly covered with a thin layer of frost, as if brushed by the shadow of death itself. Enraged, Rudolphus frantically waved his wand, launching a fierce attack on the entangled auror squad. In his fury, he cast a fortune curse in an attempt to annihilate his enemies. However, his spell was cleverly blocked by one of the team's defenders. Undeterred by the failure of his curse, Rudolphus seized the moment of his opponent's surprise and hurriedly made his way towards Bellatrix, who was still standing on the edge of the ring of fire. His heart was filled with anxiety and worry. At that moment, all he wanted was to reach his wife's side as quickly as possible and save her from danger. Rudolphus finally made it to his wife's side. Ethan's ears were filled with the taunts and confrontations between the two women. After listening for a while, he finally grasped the situation. He frowned, his gaze shifting between the dueling parties and the blue flames encircling them. Disgust surged within him like a tide. Yet, after a brief hesitation, he made the choice he always did. He swallowed his pride. With determination, he stepped forward, pushing his wife to safety away from the encircling flames. Then, brandishing his wand, Ethan launched a fierce attack on Cyrilla. Each spell was cast with ferocity, as if channeling his inner turmoil and anger. Lucius Malfoy, his identity concealed behind a mask, was quick to follow Ethan's lead. After exchanging a glance with Cyrilla, Lucius joined the fray, attacking without mercy. However, his spells seemed less lethal, more akin to taunting and harassment. The occasional curse of destiny he cast always missed its mark or lost its accuracy when aimed at the Aurors attempting to breach the war zone to provide assistance. Chapter 634. Seeing that his side had completed the encirclement of Sarala, Bellatrix couldn't help but laugh, her expression brimming with pride and arrogance. It was as if she had already glimpsed the dawn of victory. "Ha, I'm not like you, baby," she said mockingly. "You're such a naive little girl. You might be younger and more powerful than me, but unfortunately, you won't live to reach my age." Sarala, upon hearing Bellatrix's taunt, did not show any sign of annoyance. Instead, she displayed a contemptuous sneer. She moved like a ghost, effortlessly dodging the simultaneous attacks from the three assailants, maintaining a safe distance. At that moment, a dark shadow burst out from behind her, launching itself at Bellatrix with lightning speed. Bellatrix, lost in her illusion of victory, was caught off guard. The attention of her companions had been focused solely on Sarala, and they only realized the danger when the shadow was almost upon them. Fortunately for Bellatrix, Rudolphus acted swiftly, pulling her to safety and avoiding a direct hit from the shadow. Despite this, Bellatrix suffered greatly. Her clothes were shredded by the claws of the shadow, leaving 3 deep red claw marks across her chest. Had Rudolphus not intervened in time, she would have met her end right there. The trio exchanged horrified glances as they processed the sudden turn of events. It was Hermione, who had transformed into a cat the size of a leopard using her animagus power, who had attacked them. Her feline form was not only agile, but also covered in a magical sheen that made her resistant to some magical attacks. With her sharp claws, she struck back at the Lestranges, each swipe infused with the power of a curse. Even a mere brush from her claws caused excruciating pain. Bellatrix, having failed to completely evade the cat's attack, was in agony. She looked at the formidable feline with horror and envy. Yet, the chaos on the battlefield did not end there. Zhangqiu, having emerged from her magical animagus transformation into a majestic sphinx, began to sing. Her voice was melodious and mysterious, imbued with a magical power that rendered the surrounding Death Eaters lethargic and weak. The magic of her song stemmed from the scorpion's power mixed in the Sphinx's blood, along with ancient spells known to the Sphinx. This ability proved to be devastating on the battlefield, leaving the Death Eaters disoriented and vulnerable. Moreover, Zhangqiu's scorpion-tailed lineage endowed her with deadly stingers that could be launched in any direction, delivering fatal blows to her enemies. With the combined efforts of the singers, stingers, and aurors, she played a pivotal role in defeating more than 24 Death Eaters, significantly contributing to their victory. "Merlin's beard," Rodolphus exclaimed, disbelief evident in his eyes. "They have 2 magical animagi." He attempted to create a fiery encirclement to trap Hermione's cat form within the flames. However, his plan was anticipated by Sarala. Aware of Rudolphus's formidable capabilities, she had been searching for an opportunity to counter his lethal move. When Rudolphus targeted Hermione, Sarala sprang into action, casting a 5-ring spell, Flame Orb. This protective spell, designed to counter fire magic, proved effective against the fierce fire spell. Just as the cat was about to be engulfed by the flames once more, the suppression ball was timely applied to her body, forming a protective barrier that shielded her from the fiery onslaught. An indestructible protective shield rendered Rudolphus's greatest ability useless, and his fierce fire seemed powerless in front of the suppression ball. The appearance of these 2 magical animagi further demoralized the Death Eaters. They had expected the Dark Lord to quickly win the duel, but the battle's outcome was still undecided. Worse, the Dark Lord found himself in a heated confrontation with Ethan. Surrounded by the new Aurors, the Death Eaters were defeated. They waved their wands anxiously, trying to find a breakthrough, all the while secretly hoping their master would defeat the boy soon and come to their aid. Hermione, protected by the flame suppression ball, breathed a sigh of relief, glared fiercely at Rudolphus, and with a burst of energy, leaped into the air, transforming into her cat form. Wand in hand, she launched a fiery fireball at Rudolphus. Simultaneously, Cyrilla attacked, brandishing her wand and sending a huge ice pick towards the trio. Rudolphus and Bellatrix, both battle-hardened Death Eaters, dodged the attack with their quick reflexes. However, they were caught off guard when the fireball and icicle collided in midair, creating a terrifying explosion that scattered ice chips everywhere. The force of the explosion knocked them off balance and sent them flying in different directions. The aftermath was a thick white mist, created by the intermingling of ice and fire, which plunged the trio into chaos. They lost not only their vision, but also sight of each other. Despite Hermione and Cyrilla's rivalry in the Genius Club, their tacit understanding shone through at this moment. They skillfully divided the Death Eater trio, confident in their superior sensory abilities as a cat to defeat each enemy in the ensuing battles. Meanwhile, within the blue wall of fire, the Fire Elemental Lord reached its limit, unable to resist the powerful laws of the two top wizards. Trapped between their opposing forces, its elemental body began to tremble and shatter. Despite its silent roar of defiance, the struggle was in vain. Under the pressure of the opposing forces, its body reached a critical point and exploded like a punctured balloon. Made purely of flame, the energy released by its self-destruction was comparable to a small nuclear bomb. Ethan and Voldemort, faced with this devastating force, had to cast defensive spells and stagger backward to dodge the blast. The aftermath of the explosion left the area in ruins. The ground of the high platform was shattered, resembling the aftermath of a war. At the center of the explosion, a huge charred crater was a testament to the power unleashed, with magma surging like a crack in hell. The once solemn high platform was now a scene of devastation. Ethan struggled to his feet, his palms pressed against the hot ground. He wiped the blood oozing from a wound on his forehead, caused by flying rubble, and staggered toward the archway. With each step, Ethan found it increasingly difficult to move forward. Upon reaching the arch, he finally managed to steady himself, and an odd sensation washed over him. The arch seemed to exert a stronger pull on him than before. Meanwhile, Voldemort swiftly rose from the ground, his black robe scorched by flames, exposing the burned skin beneath. He employed his magic to mend his wounds, all the while eyeing Ethan with caution. Voldemort then began to slowly close the distance between them, aiming to maintain the optimal range for combat. Both understood that this was not a moment for complacency. In this life-and-death struggle, any lapse in attention could prove fatal. Chapter 6 of 35, Confrontation in the Blue Flames. The blue light of the fire cast eerie shadows on their faces as Ethan and Voldemort faced each other once more. They engaged in a tacit conversation, each trying to uncover a flaw in the other's words while simultaneously regaining some strength. "What a jealous talent!" Voldemort's hoarse and aged voice echoed through the air, a strange glint flashing in his eyes. "I must admit, you are far superior to my fifth-year self. Your exceptional skill in illusion magic has highlighted the significance of this branch of magic for me." He paused, his smugness intensifying. "However, your smooth path of growth seems to have made you complacent. You overestimate your abilities, too arrogant. Had you been more patient and not so impulsive, you might not have found yourself in this dire situation." Voldemort's words struck Ethan like a sharp blade, yet he showed no signs of agitation or anger. Instead, his response was soft and composed. "Yes, Dark Lord, choosing to confront you alone and on equal terms was indeed my arrogance. I can hold out for a while, but it seems the outcome is inevitable, and you will emerge victorious." Ethan gasped for air, feeling his spirit drained. His head spun, and his body began to tremble slightly. As the summoner of the Fire Elemental Lord, he should have had the upper hand in controlling the summon. Yet, he found himself outmaneuvered by his adversary. Despite Ethan's talent, he was acutely aware of the gap in strength between himself and Voldemort. Voldemort sneered, seemingly pleased with Ethan's acknowledgement. "Humph, it appears you are still capable of self-reflection. But alas, the world has seen too many geniuses fall due to their own hubris. You are no different." Voldemort's gaze softened slightly, a hint of mixed emotions flickering in his deep eyes as he regarded Ethan with a look of almost regret. "It's a pity things have come to this. Had you chosen to join me, we would have been invincible, beyond even Dumbledore's reach. However, you chose to provoke me, Ethan." Hearing this, Ethan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then, lifting his head, he bravely met Voldemort's gaze and stated calmly, "In a duel, The victor takes all, and the vanquished is left with nothing. That is the unyielding rule. It seems you will claim the honor in this contest between us, Dark Lord." While the battle raged within the confines of the blue flames, the situation outside painted a starkly different picture. Bellatrix appeared utterly disheveled, her head bowed, her wild curls cascading down, revealing a face contorted with anger and frustration. Her ankle was ensnared by a black tentacle dangling from the ceiling, leaving her suspended upside down, struggling in vain. This unexpected turn of events was orchestrated by Hermione, who had transformed into her cat lady form. At some point, she had cast her black tentacles spell on the ceiling and, with lightning speed, ensnared Bellatrix with unerring precision. Bellatrix writhed in the air, attempting to cast a spell to free herself, but Hermione's onslaught left her no opportunity to react. Just as she was about to be hoisted completely to the roof of the shed, Hermione found herself entangled in an attack from Lucius. Seizing the moment, Bellatrix cast the cutting charm, slicing through the black tentacles. Her body plummeted like a kite with its string cut, crashing onto the hard marble floor. "Humph. If only this hall were taller, that fall would have surely been fatal," Hermione remarked, her voice tinged with deep hostility, yet distinctly non-human. She moved with the agility of a spider across the ceiling before leaping down, dodging a black-purple spark of magic. Simultaneously, she lunged towards where Bellatrix had fallen, ready for the next move in their high-stakes confrontation. Bellatrix, suspended in midair, attempted to adjust her posture and cast spells multiple times, but it was too late. She closed her eyes, resigning herself to her fate. However, at the last moment, she heard Rudolphus chanting a spell: "Shock absorption and speed stop." With Rudolphus's spell, Bellatrix's descent slowed, but the shock-absorbing charm didn't fully take effect. She felt her body being supported by the spell's power, yet the momentum still caused her to crash to the ground. Intense pain and dizziness overwhelmed her, leaving her momentarily incapacitated. "Damn, couldn't you have been faster?" Bellatrix scolded, trying to rise, but hindered by the pain and weakness in her body. Rudolphus, her husband and fellow Death Eater, didn't reply to her complaints. Instead, he rushed to her side and cast the iron armor charm. In that moment, Sorala seized the opportunity, appearing beside Bellatrix with her sword gleaming coldly, and swung at her. The iron charm activated just in time, deflecting Sorala's sword. Bellatrix, sitting on the ground, laughed maniacally, finding some twisted pleasure in narrowly escaping death. She raised her wand at Sorala, with her eyes gleaming with a vicious desire for revenge. However, her smug smile froze the next moment. Hermione suddenly emerged, diving down at an astonishing speed. She extended her palm, now sharp with cat claws, and struck the iron armor spell's shield. This attack, following Sorala's sword strike, caused the shield to shatter completely, emitting a sound akin to glass breaking. Hermione's cursed claws demolished the iron armor curse. Yet, she didn't advance further, instead leaping back nimbly, evading the requisition spell Bellatrix cast in retaliation. Hermione stood at a distance, her gaze cold, indicating the real threat was elsewhere. Penelo Riot, clad in an Auror uniform, appeared as if from nowhere, her sudden presence startling everyone. Rudolphus's right wrist was severely damaged, the flesh corroded away to reveal only a blackened skeleton, his wand destroyed. To prevent the rot from spreading, Rudolphus, in agony, severed his own wrist with a knife. This shocking development revealed that while Hermione used her cursed claws to break the iron curse and then dodged, Rudolphus was attacked by Penelope. The battlefield, seemingly a 2-on-3 scenario with Hermione and Cyrilla against Bellatrix, Rudolphus, and Lucius, was in reality evenly matched. Penelope, the third ally of Hermione and Cyrilla, had remained hidden using invisibility, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now, seizing her opportunity, she aimed to coordinate with her companions and launched an acid arrow at Bellatrix, who was still aiming her wand. Rudolphus, realizing the iron armor curse meant to protect his wife, was shattered, and though he couldn't see Penelope, sensed the magical energy aimed at Bellatrix. Caught off guard, he didn't have time to recast the iron armor spell. Without seeing the attack, he instinctively moved to shield Bellatrix, only to be directly hit by the strong acid. In just a matter of seconds, Ethan's entire right hand was corrupted by Penelope's spell. Bellatrix glanced at Rudolphus's bleeding, broken wrist with a flash of surprise in her eyes, mixed with an unconcealable disgust, as if the rescue was a moral imposition on her. She leapt from the ground, her face twisted in rage toward Hermione, as if intending to unleash all her anger and madness upon her. Among the three adversaries, Sorella treated flashing as second nature, engaging in a prolonged duel with Bellatrix. Despite Bellatrix's efforts, she suffered several cuts from Sorella, yet failed to land a single hit in return. Penelope, having just cast a strong acid arrow, vanished from sight, leaving his opponents uncertain of his whereabouts. The battle seemed to be over, with only Hermione in a position to pursue the fleeing enemies. Realizing the raid had been successful, Hermione quickly created distance between herself and her foes. She planned to capitalize on the victory, intending to pursue them once she had regained her strength, giving her opponents no chance to recover. Bellatrix, however, seemed to sense Hermione's intentions, but was too overwhelmed by her own rage and madness to care. "Don't go! Ah!" she screamed, yet continued to chase after Hermione as if she hadn't heard her own plea. Unlike the frenzied Bellatrix, Lucius Malfoy maintained his composure. Wearing a mask, he crouched and moved to Rudolphus's side, attempting to stem the bleeding with his wand. Unfortunately, his proficiency in healing magic was lacking, and the spell had little effect on Rudolphus's severe wrist wound. Without hesitation, Lucius retrieved a potion from his robes and poured it over the injury, managing to slow the bleeding. He continued his efforts to staunch the flow from his former Quidditch teammate's wound, demonstrating a rare moment of concern amidst the chaos. Chapter 636. At that moment, a violent explosion erupted from the blue circle of light. The fire elemental lord had detonated. The explosion caused the adjacent blue wall of fire to spill out flames, making the entire space tremble with the force. Rudolphus, preoccupied with his broken wrist and the potential loss of his hand, was jolted by the noise. Lifting his head, a mix of horror and confusion flashed in his eyes as he witnessed the scene, seemingly unable to grasp the sudden turn of events. "Get out of the way! You're behind your back!" Rudolphus exclaimed. Ignoring the sharp pain in his wrist, he quickly reached out to pull Lucius, who was facing away from the flames. However, before he could finish his warning, the raging flames had already licked Lucius's kneeling calves and were rapidly spreading to his back. Rudolphus's pull caused Lucius to lose his balance and stagger forward. Turning his head, Lucius looked at the flames behind him in shock, only to see them quickly recede, as if the crisis had been nothing but an illusion. Thankfully no rocks were blown out. Lucius breathed a sigh of relief, mistakenly thinking Rudolphus was warning him about the potential aftermath of the explosion. The master and the one named Ethan fought fiercely. Seeing Lucius unharmed, Rudolphus's expression darkened, and he clenched his mouth tightly, as if suppressing his emotions. He scanned the area and realized they were alone. The intense 3-on-3 battle had allowed them to use the requisition curse without restraint, and had kept many Death Eaters and Aurors at bay due to occasional explosions. In the distance, Bellatrix wielded her whip fervently, relentlessly pursuing her target. Hermione stood her ground, wand aimed at Bellatrix, who was splattered with blood. Bellatrix, seeking an opportunity, pointed her wand at Hermione, ready to cast the Avada Suo curse. However, after the explosion, Hermione, initially preparing to flank Bellatrix with Sorella, suddenly abandoned the confrontation. With a determined look, she stepped into the blue wall of flames below the steps, as if she had made a crucial decision. Inside the wall of flames, the battle was nearing its conclusion. Rudolphus silently observed as Lucius bandaged his wounds. It wasn't until he was almost finished that he noticed his wife, Bellatrix, had returned. Despite her exhaustion, excitement sparkled in her eyes as she recounted the events on the central battlefield to Rudolphus. As he listened, a look of realization dawned on Rudolphus's face. Glancing sarcastically at the blue flame, he remarked to Lucius and Bellatrix in his usual playful tone, Our master should have brought Nagini with him. Look at him now. It's quite embarrassing." On the high platform under the arch, Voldemort's black wizard's robe was tattered, revealing burns of various attributes, charred tree-like burns, flame burns, and blue-purple frostbite, all inflicted by Ethan's iridescent magic. His face was pale, and his eyes gleamed with resentment, as if he was on the brink of vengeance. However, Ethan's condition was not much better. Having retreated to the stone pillar of the arch, his breath was short, his face pale, and he was clearly struggling to hold on. Ethan still clutched his wand, though the light in his eyes had dimmed. Voldemort's eyes gleamed with confident arrogance, believing that within 2 or 3 more exchanges, he would defeat Ethan and claim victory. This victory seemed to be arriving sooner than Voldemort had anticipated, but he was nonetheless filled with smug satisfaction. After all, defeating a formidable opponent held far more value than overcoming a mere collection of weaklings. However, just as victory seemed within his grasp, a powerful surge of magic erupted from behind him. Startled, Voldemort turned to find Neville, Ginny, and Colin standing amidst blue flames, unharmed. They had silently approached him, shielded by the magical fire. "How dare you!" Voldemort roared, but it was too late. He could only watch as the students cast spells at him, filled with shock and anger. He hastily conjured a protective silver shield to fend off the attack. The students had prepared well. Their spells, such as the levitation spell and 3 feet away, were not lethal, but designed to displace him forcefully. As Voldemort was propelled through the air, he realized the student's intention was not to kill him outright, but to push him into the arch. These Gryffindor students must have been adult elite wizards in disguise, enhanced by Polyjuice Potion, for their spells to possess such power. Struggling to regain control, Voldemort found no reprieve as the students relentlessly cast spells, driving him towards the arch. The fear he now felt was unlike any other. The prospect of being thrown into the arch, a symbol of death shrouded in divine mystery and horror, filled him with dread. History had shown that no one returned from entering the arch, and Voldemort feared that even his Horcruxes might not guarantee his resurrection. In this moment of desperation, Voldemort's decades of experience came to the forefront. He transformed the hem of his robe into long strips that wrapped around anything within reach, trying to anchor himself. Simultaneously, he employed a flight magic akin to that used by Dementors, enveloping himself in black smoke to slow his momentum and evade being cast into the arch. His face twisted in a grotesque expression of madness and despair as he fought against his inevitable fate. In the final confrontation with death itself, an unexpected transformation occurred. Ethan's previously frail form vanished, replaced by a radiant and towering figure who stood beneath Voldemort, observing his aerial maneuvers with a twinkle of playful light in his eyes, as if declaring, "You have been deceived." This sudden change took everyone by surprise, making Ethan's prior defeats seem like mere illusions. "Finger of Death!" Ethan's voice rang out, uttering an unfamiliar incantation. His wand, swift as a meteor cutting through the night sky, pointed directly at Voldemort's chest. A fearsome black-red force tore through the air, hurtling towards Voldemort with an aura of death so potent it rivaled the power of the killing curse Voldemort himself wielded. Voldemort's heart raced, gripped by an unseen force as he faced this unknown spell. Realizing the grave threat, Voldemort abandoned his attempt to transform into a black mist. Instead, he shouted loudly and waved his wand, manipulating the stones around him to form a barrier. However, when the spell collided, an earth-shattering explosion occurred, shaking the very space around them. Voldemort was forced back by the immense impact, and the stones meant to protect him disintegrated into powder under the spell's terrifying force, scattering in all directions. Ethan observed the aftermath and sighed inwardly. As expected, the Finger of Death, without sufficient practice, still falls short. Yet, there was no hint of disappointment in his demeanor. Instead, he looked up at Voldemort with a glint of appreciation in his eyes. "What a commendable skill, Mr. Riddle. Your levitation charm is quite effective." Chapter 637. A Righteous Gang Fight. Ethan knew clearly in his heart that although his strongest blow was skillfully dodged by Voldemort, he had firmly grasped the initiative from the beginning of the battle and was already invincible. He understood that as long as he acted cautiously and avoided being instantly killed by his opponent, the final victory would be as easy as picking something out of a bag. This ambush against the Death Eaters, as well as his sneak attack on Voldemort just now, were all part of his careful planning. He had long realized that before he truly became a legend, Wanting to defeat legendary wizards like Dumbledore and Voldemort in a one-on-one duel was tantamount to wishful thinking. Therefore, he had to skillfully use various off-field methods to win this contest. In fact, from the beginning of the team that broke into the Department of Mysteries, except for his fake Ronald, all other members were real. The fact that Neville and the others were swapped happened after he had a fierce duel with Voldemort. Strictly speaking, the only ones who were actually swapped were Neville and Colin, while Ginny was still the same Ginny, or to be more precise, she was the key to the smooth implementation of the entire swap plan. She used a low-level spell called King Car Castling, which allowed a pair of willing recipients to quickly switch places in an emergency. This is almost one of the lowest-level space spells, but precisely because its level is low enough, it exerts an unexpected effect here. A low enough level means that the magic fluctuations generated are minimal. Under the cover of the blue firewall and the control of Ginny's superb spellcasting, the Aurors who drank the Polyjuice potion were able to complete the swap with the little wizards without anyone noticing. This allowed the three of them to work together to deliver a fatal blow to Voldemort, thus reversing the course of the entire war. Cold sweat was pouring down Voldemort's completely hairless head, and droplets slid down his pale scalp. His whole body was tense, like Peter Parker trying to stop a speeding locomotive with a small amount of force, struggling to maintain his balance. He turned his head and glanced at the thick curtain below him. The faint murmurs coming from inside the curtain were like some kind of ominous omen, which made his heart tense. At this moment, he understood Ethan's sinister intentions, and anger, fear, and grievance surged in his heart like waves. In his opinion, he had given the other party the highest courtesy. He endured his patience and allowed the young boy in front of him to change his clothes on the spot, and even allowed those obstructive order members to leave safely. He originally thought that all this would show his generosity and tolerance, so that he could completely convince the opponent in the duel and take him under his command. However, things developed far beyond his expectations. Ethan showed extraordinary strength and determination in the duel, which forced Voldemort to change his original intention of conquering the opponent. Even so, at the critical moment when he almost lost his life, Voldemort never felt the slightest resentment towards Ethan. In fact, from Voldemort's point of view, he had rarely been so generous. But reality gave him a loud slap in the face. His good intentions, his tolerance, and generosity seemed so pale in front of this cunning opponent. What about the promised fight to the death? What about the honor of a fair, one-on-one duel? Fake, all fake. All this was nothing but lies and disguises carefully woven by Ethan. Voldemort finally understood that Ethan had been plotting against him from the beginning. The decisive battle and the reluctance to hurt innocent people were all things Ethan had set up for this moment. What he was waiting for was this opportunity, and he used this despicable and shameless method to force him into a desperate situation and into this arch. Anger and despair intertwined within Voldemort, creating a storm of emotions that threatened to consume him. Voldemort's heart churned with a violent whirlwind of emotions. He felt deceived, betrayed, and abandoned by the honor that once belonged to a pure-blood wizard. The scheming opponent before him stood not far away, seemingly mocking his stupidity and naivety. "Ah, die!" Voldemort's snake-like twisted face became particularly ferocious and terrifying. His eyes burned with the flames of anger after being played by Ethan. He felt utterly humiliated, and the rage within him was like a raging fire, consuming his heart. At this moment, violent emotions stirred within him like a storm. He longed to tear apart the boy who dared to set him up and destroy all the little bugs in front of him. His reason had been overwhelmed by anger, leaving only a pure desire for destruction. Voldemort opened his mouth, and a ball of red fire shot out, rising into the air. The flame instantly transformed into a huge fire python, which, with the momentum of destroying everything, pounced towards Neville and the others who had arrived on the high platform. However, his attack failed. Seeing the miss, Ginny no longer planned to stay. She had already chosen to leave without hesitation, in accordance with her prior agreement with Ethan. She knew clearly that if the attack failed, she would have to evacuate immediately to avoid distracting Ethan from protecting her during the battle. So, at the moment when the fire snake was about to touch them, Ginny and the others disappeared like ghosts, leaving only 3 real mirror images that twisted and dissipated in the flames. The real individuals had already quietly slipped away, while Voldemort was concentrating on resisting the finger of death. At the same time, the Death Eaters outside the blue circle of fire also witnessed this scene. They were surprised to find that their master had fallen into someone else's trick and almost died. This sudden change plunged them into panic and commotion. When they discovered that their master had been deceived and nearly killed, they began to riot. Originally, they were the ambushed party and were always at a disadvantage. They had persisted until now entirely because they had Voldemort, a powerful backbone, supporting them. However, now that the backbone seemed unreliable, the immense psychological pressure caused them to begin to collapse. Some Death Eaters with weak psychological endurance were the first to succumb to the pressure and began to escape. They all used apparition and disappeared, leaving behind a chaotic battlefield. The remaining Death Eaters fell into a more passive situation. Without unified command and leadership, they began to fight independently and were soon defeated one by the Aurors. At this time, several more wizards bravely walked through the blazing blue flames and stepped onto the high platform. They all wore standard combat uniforms, but if you looked carefully, you could see that the color matching of these uniforms was different from the Auror uniforms. Their collar badges were not the familiar A-letter badges of Aurors, but the unique logo of the Austrian and French companies. As soon as they stepped into the range of the blue flames, they launched a fierce attack on Voldemort without hesitation. Spells coming from different directions intertwined into a deadly net in the air. But there was only one target, the ferocious-faced Dark Lord standing on the high platform. Hermione and Cyrilla, who had transformed into catgirls, had already quietly passed through the flames and joined the battle. Cyrilla looked at a wizard wearing the mark of the Arcane United Company, who was mercilessly devoured as soon as he rushed into the flames, with an expression of gloating on her face. She knew the origin of this wall of fire very well, but Voldemort knew nothing about it. In fact, the information for this mysterious firewall came from the rare magic books collected by Rowena Ravenclaw from Durmstrang's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was once one of the favorite spells of the first Dark Lord, Grindelwald. This magic cleverly combines magical flames with the power of legilimency, allowing it to sense the thoughts of those who enter the fire. If the person who touches the flame remains loyal to the caster, the flame will pass over them gently without causing any harm. However, if the entrant is double-minded and cannot remain loyal enough to the caster, they will face a tragic end, with both body and soul destroyed. Following Cyrilla and Hermione, more and more people passed through the flames and arrived at the Death Hall. Powerful wizards such as Tonks, Jaina, and Onyxia also arrived one after another. With the addition of Pinello and Zhang Chu, all the high-end combat power of the Genius Club had gathered here. They formed an impenetrable circle around Voldemort, ready to compete. Voldemort could feel the magic contained in the bodies of these people surging like turbulent waves. Although he was barely able to defend or dodge the spells coming at him, he was deeply aware that the power contained in the spells cast by these wizards was far beyond that of ordinary people. Originally, Voldemort thought that the students who attacked him earlier were already rare elite wizards under Ethan Green. However, these people in front of him surprised him. Each one seemed more powerful than those pretenders. Especially the 2 mature women with blonde and black hair among them. They looked the oldest and were also the strongest. The blonde one used ice spells, and the black-haired one used fire spells. The power of their spells left Voldemort stunned. It could be said that the power they displayed was no less than that of Ethan Green, whom he greatly feared. The only shortcoming was that they were not as versatile and flexible as Ethan. Voldemort quickly waved his wand and conjured a silver shield, fending off attacks from all directions in a panic. He had already consumed a lot of energy in the previous duel. Facing these continuous magical attacks, he felt increasingly powerless and could not even sustain for 2 rounds. Deep doubts arose in Voldemort's heart. He could not understand why so many powerful masters had suddenly emerged in the world of wizards. The power of these wizards made him feel oppressed and powerless like never before. He understood that even if he did not duel with Ethan, he would never survive the siege of so many powerful wizards. Chapter 638. The outcome is decided. Aurors, continue to deploy the dimensional anchor. Don't let this half-blood wizard, Tom Riddle, escape. Ethan's voice echoed through the air, carrying a tone of leisure and contentment. He seemed to have foreseen Voldemort's defeat, as if everything was under his control. These words acted like a fuse, instantly igniting the anger in Voldemort's heart. Ethan had deliberately revealed his true origin and name, a move that made Voldemort feel more aggrieved and enraged than ever before. He understood that Ethan did it on purpose, just to provoke him into staying and then be beaten to death by a group of people. However, Voldemort, being a Dark Lord, had his own pride and dignity. He couldn't let his opponent get what he wanted, let alone surrender here. What Voldemort failed to notice was that Ethan's order was only verbal. No Auror actually took action. At this moment, more Death Eaters had begun to flee. They no longer blindly followed Voldemort, but chose to protect themselves. The others were also fighting and retreating while keeping an eye on Voldemort's situation. They retained the last bit of loyalty, but seemed ready to leave this place of conflict at any moment. Only Bellatrix was frantic, jumping up and down in hysteria. She screamed at the black mist formed by the fleeing Death Eaters on the steps. "Come back and fight! Come back!" Her shouts echoed in the empty hall, but no one responded. In truth, Ethan never really planned to keep Voldemort here, even though their overall strength far exceeded that of the Dark Wizard. In Ethan's careful planning, he originally intended to attack Voldemort in a special way, by pushing him behind the mysterious curtain to truly kill him. This plan was full of risks and uncertainties, but Ethan believed it was a method worth trying. If successful, it would mean eliminating their most serious enemy without a single blow. However, he was also prepared for failure. If the ambush failed, he had no intention of using powerful magic like Dimensional Anchor to force Voldemort to stay. Although they had the opportunity and strength to truly kill Voldemort here, Ethan also analyzed the consequences of doing so. Voldemort was an extremely dangerous and tenacious enemy. If forced into a desperate situation, he would fight back with all his strength. Such a battle would be extremely brutal, and the price paid would be unimaginable. Even if they could eventually defeat Voldemort, they would surely suffer unbearable casualties. Moreover, such a victory would only be temporary. Ethan knew that many years later, Voldemort would likely make a comeback in some way, rendering all efforts in vain. Things were completely different now. They had proven through actual combat that in a well-prepared frontal war, their high-end combat capabilities, combined with the power of Aurors, could completely crush the Death Eaters and achieve an overwhelming victory. Now that they had such strength and confidence, there was no need to adopt overly radical and all-out measures to deal with Voldemort. After all, their goal was not just to defeat Voldemort once, but to completely destroy his power so that the Dark Wizard could no longer pose a threat to the wizarding world. On the political level, Ethan and Gianna had extremely far-reaching considerations. They knew that the strong performance shown today and the glorious record of successfully repelling Voldemort would undoubtedly win Jaina's faction a pivotal position within the Ministry of Magic and could even lead the direction of the entire magical world. However, they also understood the truth that the trees that stand tall in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Today's outstanding performance would inevitably arouse the fear and hostility of British pureblood families in the future, especially Ethan and Jaina, who almost all came here as outsiders. The Wizarding Team. The leadership is mostly composed of Muggle-born, half-blood wizards, and pureblood wizards who no longer hold much political influence. Such a composition undoubtedly threatens the interests of traditional pureblood families, akin to touching their sacred cheese. Therefore, keeping Voldemort in the background became a necessary part of their strategy. By allowing Voldemort to remain as the sword of Damocles hanging over everyone's heads, wizards in the magical world would truly feel the presence of a powerful threat. This desire for security would make them more tolerant of the actions and policies of Jaina's faction. After all, in the face of a great enemy, internal disputes and dissatisfaction seem insignificant. Ethan and Jaina understood this very well, so they chose not to completely eliminate Voldemort, but to leave this hidden danger. They believed that in the days to come, this would become an important trump card for them to consolidate their position and expand their influence. Within the Department of Mysteries, arcane eyes were spread across every corner like stars, silently recording every tiny movement. Today's duel scene, from Voldemort's arrogant provocation to Ethan's calm response, was captured by these secret eyes. These precious materials, after clever editing and arrangement, would be presented on television in the wizarding world, allowing countless audiences to witness Ethan's bravery and wisdom. As the footage spread, Ethan's image would gradually become more popular. His fame would not be limited to academia. He would become the new savior standing at the forefront of the storm. His figure would replace the respected white wizard Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, who had guarded the world for a long time, and the legendary boy who survived, Harry James Potter, becoming a new spiritual symbol and idol in the wizarding world. Most importantly, Ethan believed in his talent and potential, convinced that time would be his greatest ally. With each passing day, his strength was steadily growing. With each challenge he faced, his power increased. If he continued to grow at this rate, he would definitely face Voldemort in a year or two with a more mature and powerful attitude. By then, he believed he could defeat Voldemort in a fair one-on-one duel, so why should he be so eager now? Voldemort, tightly surrounded by everyone, raised his wand high in the air. His black magic robe seemed to come to life, transforming into long, tentacle-like belts that waved wildly behind him, sweeping away everything in their path. These long belts, with the fierce sound of wind, attacked Ethan and the others closest to him. Following closely was a vigorous fire. The flames seemed to be carried by the strong wind, forming fire snakes that twisted and rolled in the air, roaring towards the encirclement. Just when everyone was trying their best to deal with his sudden outburst, Voldemort took the opportunity to transform into a billowing column of black smoke. His figure flickered in and out of the black smoke, escaping directly from the arch at a strange speed and trajectory. He had keenly observed the loopholes in the encirclement, and now selected the opponent that was easiest to overcome quickly. If he couldn't afford to offend the wizards of the Genius Club, could he not afford to deal with ordinary people? Voldemort suddenly rose up, ignoring the weak magic power in his body, and forcefully activated All Curses End. A dazzling blue light burst from the tip of his wand, violently colliding with the vigorous blue wall of fire. The blue light instantly tore a big hole in the flame, and Voldemort took the opportunity to rush out of the gap, directly knocking away several Aurors and Death Eaters in his path. During this process, he did not forget to move the silver shield to his back. To avoid being tripped, he even ignored most of the attacks coming from behind, only resisting those spells that would cause fatal injuries. In this manner, he managed to escape. Ethan Green managed to sustain some injuries, but quickly flew out of the encirclement. Seeing him break free safely and unharmed, Bellatrix was so excited that she couldn't control herself and cheered loudly. Voldemort heard her cheers, changed his flight direction, and flew towards her. At the same time, Lucius Malfoy also witnessed this scene. His eyes flashed under the mask, and it was unclear what he was thinking. He grabbed Rudolphus, who was in a daze, staring deeply at his severed hand in a trance. Lucius forcefully pulled Rudolphus back to reality. Their eyes met for a moment before they looked away. "My loyal servants, leave this place quickly." Voldemort's cold voice, like a snake's hiss, echoed inside and outside the death hall. Each word and sentence was like an icy tentacle wrapping around everyone's heart. "And you, those who are my enemies and dare to hurt my men, will eventually be swallowed up by the endless darkness. Ministry of Magic, just watch carefully. What awaits you is the end of the world. Judgment." The walls and floors seemed to tremble with the Dark Lord's anger, transmitting his voice to every corner, making everyone feel the biting chill. With this order, the Death Eaters, who had been hesitant due to fear of the Dark Lord, suddenly felt relieved. They sped up their spells, eager to break free from the Aurors and escape the battlefield as soon as possible. Their figures quickly dissipated into the darkness, leaving only tension and fear in the air. At the same time, Voldemort's figure approached the female Death Eater. His voice suddenly became high-pitched and his cold tone revealed endless murderous intent. Ethan Green, you better pray you have such luck next time. Chapter 639, Dumbledore Returns. This is just a small reward for your scheme against me in the Goblet of Fire last year, Ethan Green responded without showing any signs of weakness. Tom Riddle, you should be the one hoping for good luck next time. Today's outcome is enough to illustrate the point. I am not the one running for my life now. Your men have also suffered heavy losses, and the Ministry of Magic, and I have proven who is the dominant side in this third war. He then turned to his Aurors and company employees and loudly encouraged them, Wizards, we have won tonight. From now on, these Death Eaters will be like rats on the street, sneaking around to cause trouble. They will no longer dare to face us head-on. Ethan Green's voice overwhelmed Voldemort's, penetrating the chaos and darkness of the Death Hall and reaching the hearts of everyone present. Unlike Voldemort, who blindly used a loudspeaker, Ethan employed a more sophisticated phantom sound technique, skillfully integrating the sound transmission skills of psychic powers. This made every word he said resonate directly in the hearts of the listeners, making it impossible to ignore and unforgettable. Ethan's words were like a warm current, inspiring everyone present. Whether they were Aurors of the Ministry of Magic or employees of Alpha and Associates, they all drew strength and courage from his voice. They began to realize that the power of the Dark Lord might not be as terrifying as they had imagined, especially since they had more than just Ethan on their side. Their leaders, Jaina Proudmoore, Deputy Minister of Magic and Director of the Department of Enforcement of Magical Laws, Katrana Prestor, Director of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, and Nymphadora Tonks, Deputy Director of the Auror Office, were each powerful wizards with unique skills, bravery, and fearlessness. They were a solid backing they could rely on. Even Ethan Green's female companions, who were still at Hogwarts, looked different in their eyes. Although they had not graduated yet, they had already shown amazing magical talents. Each of them could transform into an animagus, a magical creature. This was undoubtedly the best proof of their strength and potential. That girl from Ravenclaw Academy, Cho Chang, transformed into a sphinx with the characteristics of a manticore. The manticore is classified as a dangerous 5x magical creature by the Ministry of Magic, known for its ability to kill wizards with ease and its untamable nature. When Cho Chang transformed into a sphinx, she not only possessed the ancient magic of the sphinx, but also mastered the terrifying song and deadly sting of the manticore. These abilities gave her a huge advantage in battles with other ordinary wizards, making her a force to be reckoned with. Another girl, who was equally eye-catching, was Hermione Granger, who had already become famous throughout Europe through the Tri-Wizard tournament. Her incarnation of Nekomata had already shown amazing fighting power in the Tri-Wizard tournament. Nekomata is known for its agility and unique magical skills. When Hermione transformed into Nekomata, she not only possessed Nekomata's extraordinary speed and strength, but also mastered its unique magical attack methods. This allowed her to quickly defeat enemies in battle, becoming another powerful weapon against Death Eaters. With these teammates around, how could the Aurors and company employees not feel at ease? Suddenly, the corner of Voldemort's eye caught a ray of fire flashing out of thin air on the high platform. This sudden vision stopped the harsh words he was about to blurt out. He took a deep breath and disappeared into the darkness with Bellatrix in an instant, leaving no trace. Seeing this, Lucius Malfoy immediately followed him. He had been ready to escape since Voldemort's defeat. He glanced regretfully at a strong man lying on the ground in the distance. He was the patriarch of the Gower family, one of the few remaining loyal Death Eaters. Of the two vassal family, Ez of the Malfoy family, the other leader of the Mongolian clan, Crabbe, had already fled before Voldemort issued the retreat order. Lucius shook his head helplessly, followed by Rudolph's, and he disappeared into the air. There were not many Death Eaters like Lucius Malfoy who chose to escape. However, there were also some unlucky ones who were slow to respond and were surrounded by Aurors, unable to escape. During the struggle, they were gradually subdued by the Aurors, and the masks on their faces were taken off, revealing their true identities. They watched in despair as their companions disappeared into the darkness one by one, leaving only a few Death Eaters who were as unfortunate as themselves, waiting for an unknown judgment. Even more unfortunate were those Death Eaters who were interrupted by the Auror's spell while trying to escape by apparition. Their bodies were ruthlessly chopped up in the twisted space, leaving only piles of minced meat scattered on the floor, which was too horrible to look at. A terrifying and depressing atmosphere permeated the entire hall, making people shudder. The moment Voldemort left, the room was suddenly filled with golden red light. A fiery red phoenix spread its wings and flew, its crisp chirping echoing in the empty hall. Dumbledore, dressed in gray and white robes, stood steadily on the high platform with the firelight. The phoenix hovered gracefully in the air behind him, its gorgeous feathers shining with warm light. "I hope I'm not late," Dumbledore said gently, his voice full of soothing power. His eyes gently turned to Harry. At that moment, Harry felt his nerves, which had been tense all night, finally relax. The fear and anxiety in his heart seemed to be gently relieved by a warm current. The familiar sense of security calmed Harry down, and he knew that as long as Dumbledore was around, everything would be different. Even if he had foolishly fallen into Voldemort's trap, and even if Sirius and other partners were facing arrest by the Ministry of Magic at the moment, he firmly believed that Dumbledore would have a way to solve all this. "It's not too late, Albus." Moody stepped forward and quickly introduced the current situation to Dumbledore. His brows were furrowed, and his expression revealed his anger at the Ministry of Magic's behavior of not distinguishing between good and evil. "Ethan Green is obviously using our Order of the Phoenix as bait. Dumbledore, we must take action as soon as possible. Otherwise—" Dumbledore raised his hand to signal Moody to be quiet. His eyes passed through the chaotic hall and fixed on the door. There, Fudge led a group of witches and wizards, panting into the room as if they had just experienced a long run. Their arrival was like a surging tide, breaking the tranquility of the air. Fudge wiped the sweat from his bare forehead. He looked around and turned pale with fright at the purgatory-like scene in the hall. He hurriedly looked for Jaina Proudmoore in the crowd and finally saw her in a corner. "Jaina, how is the situation now?" he asked eagerly, his voice unclear, obviously not fully recovered from the panic. Miss Jaina Proudmoore shrugged and said politely, "If you chose apparition instead of coming here on foot, you might have had a face-to-face meeting with the escaping people." Everyone could tell that she was clearly being sarcastic because he didn't dare to meet Voldemort, so he chose to come on foot. "I just needed time to gather." "So he was really beaten away by you?" Fudge deflated instantly like a popped balloon. He originally wanted to find some stairs for himself, but then he realized that the mysterious man was really driven away by them. This made him feel surprised and embarrassed, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. At this moment, a panicked voice suddenly sounded, breaking the brief silence. "Minister," Percy Weasley burst in, holding a piece of parchment. His face was full of surprise, obviously not expecting. The Department of Mysteries, usually a place of eerie silence, was now bustling with people. The aftermath of the battle left the Hall of Death reeking of blood, a stench that was almost unbearable. Percy Weasley felt a deep-seated fear as he took in the gruesome scene. He had never witnessed such a brutal wizarding war. Frozen in place, his eyes widened, trying to absorb the entire horrific tableau. After a moment, Percy noticed that even a great wizard like Dumbledore was among the crowd. Realizing something was terribly wrong, his body began to tremble. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. He had come to report an urgent matter, but now he hesitated, unable to form a coherent sentence. "What are you hesitating for?" Fudge demanded impatiently. "If you have something to say, just say it." Fudge's face was flushed with anger, clearly frustrated by Percy's hesitation. His downfall seemed inevitable, and he had little left to lose. Percy took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Finally, he managed to speak. Minister, the Dementors have rebelled and left Azkaban. They have collectively taken refuge with the one who must not be named, and the remaining prisoners have also escaped. Fudge's face turned even paler. His eyes widened in disbelief. This news was a devastating blow, and he regretted allowing Percy to deliver it so openly. The room fell into a dead silence. Everyone stopped what they were doing, listening intently to the conversation. The air felt thick and suffocating. The only exception was Cyrilla, who was focused on pulling her sword from the body of a fallen Death Eater. The blade sliced through the air, splattering blood everywhere. Her face showed no mercy, only cold determination. As she raised her head, she saw a scene that filled her with anger. Hermione, Cho Chang, and Ginny were all gathered around Ethan, clinging to him intimately, as if declaring their ownership. Even Penelope, who usually acted indifferent towards men, was leaning in with a bright smile. Cyrilla felt a surge of inexplicable anger. Were these people so adept at seizing opportunities? She couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration. Especially Hermione Granger, who usually seemed so reserved, was now boldly declaring her claim in front of everyone. Their actions made Cyrilla feel foolish. She was the only one still diligently clearing the battlefield with other Aurors, executing Death Eaters who neither fought nor surrendered but pretended to be dead. An inexplicable anger surged within her, making her feel isolated and excluded. These people only cared about their own happiness, completely disregarding her feelings. "How long will it take for us to change back?" Neville asked, sitting on the steps and breathing heavily. He looked away from the affectionate figures on the high platform. Rubbing his chubby face, he complained to Colin beside him, "Although we're both fat, I prefer my own face." The Polyjuice potion this time is a mass-produced product from our company's Technology Research and Development Department. It's of high quality and lasts a long time. "I guess we'll have to wait until tomorrow to return to our original appearances," replied the person who looked like Neville but was actually an employee from the Technology R&D Department of the French Union Company. They had exchanged appearances using the potion. As he spoke, he poked Neville's belly and smiled. "You." Neville grimaced and sighed. "I really envy Mr. Ethan. He can use transfiguration to change his appearance at will, but I have to drink that toad egg-flavored potion. The smell makes me want to vomit." Recalling the extremely weird smell of the potion, Neville's entire face twisted into a grimace. When Colin heard this, he couldn't help but smack his lips, recalling the taste of the potion he had drunk. "What does your potion taste like? The one I drank was weird. But it's quite novel to experience this feeling when I come back and grow up," he said, waving his strong arms that he had never experienced before, a proud smile on his face. Chapter 640, Fudge is Doomed. "I didn't do anything, and these are not my fault." Fudge's face was dark, and his voice was low and weak. He had been beaten down by successive blows, but he still muttered and tried to shirk responsibility. Jaina Proudmoore frowned slightly. She walked up to Fudge and reminded him, "Cornelius, Azkaban is under your direct jurisdiction. As the Minister of Magic, you have an unshirkable leadership responsibility for it." Behind Fudge, Percy Weasley quietly curled his lips. He had always prided himself on being flexible and good at observing people's actions, and at this moment he was keenly aware that a change of power was taking place. He had previously chosen to become Fudge's assistant because it was easier to climb up in this position, but just in case, he also agreed to provide intelligence to the Jaina faction. Now, he was extremely glad that he had done so. It was this decision that allowed him to make a significant contribution at a critical moment. Percy was secretly pleased with himself. Although he was close to Fudge, he had not completely lost the trust of Jaina's faction. Additionally, he was a member of the Weasley family, and Ethan had always been on good terms with the Weasleys. Ethan had not only invested in the business of Percy's father and twin brothers, but judging from the many women around Ethan now, the relationship between his sister and Ethan was obviously unclear. With so many connections as support, Percy was full of confidence in his future political career. At the same time, Fudge also noticed Percy's gaze. Following the direction he looked, the familiar white beard and half-moon glasses came into view. For a moment, he seemed to be back in his heyday. As the Minister of Magic, he could dispatch countless Aurors with a single order. Arrest Dumbledore quickly. Fudge's conditioned reflex made him almost order the arrest of Dumbledore on the high platform. However, he immediately realized his situation. Today, he was no longer the powerful Minister of Magic, but a down-and-out man who ignored warnings and made poor decisions, causing the situation to get out of control. He shook his head, reluctantly giving up on arresting Dumbledore. He had too much to take care of himself, so why bother arresting Dumbledore? Fudge's heart was filled with regret. He regretted that he had not listened to Dumbledore's warning about the return of the Dark Lord, and regretted that his overconfidence and blind optimism had led to the current situation. If Dumbledore's warning had been heeded, perhaps the situation now would be completely different. He looked up at Dumbledore on the high platform, the great wizard he had always wanted to surpass but could never reach. At this moment, Dumbledore still maintained his calmness and composure, as if he had anticipated all this. Obviously, Dumbledore did not care about the existence of Fudge, a loser, but walked straight towards Ethan near the arch, which meant that in his eyes, Ethan was the first person to talk to on the battlefield. Behind him, Fudge could only shake his head helplessly, lamenting that his former glory had become a thing of the past. Dumbledore walked up to Ethan, and their eyes met in the air. After experiencing this series of events, Dumbledore's gaze towards Ethan had undergone subtle changes. It was no longer filled with the kindness of an elder and the authority of a headmaster as in the past, but with more equality and respect. Apparently, he already regarded Ethan as his equal. "Ethan," Dumbledore spoke, his voice calm but with an attitude that could not be refused. "Now that you have won the victory, I beg you to allow the members of the Order of the Phoenix to leave. You know, they have not yet adapted to this game. They have no ill intentions towards the Ministry of Magic or you. They just want to protect Harry and ensure he doesn't get hurt in this fight." Dumbledore pointed in the direction of the Order members. "At least we have." "Headmaster Dumbledore, I should respect your request." Ethan sighed. "But they broke into the Ministry of Magic without permission, especially into the Department of Mysteries, which has the highest level of confidentiality. This is undoubtedly a serious violation of the law. We cannot just ignore them because of a special situation. This is unfair to other wizards and disrespectful of the law." Ethan straightened his back. Although his magic power was somewhat depleted at this time, he knew that he had to persevere and not expose any flaws. After all, he now represented not only himself, but also Leafa United Company and Jaina of the Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore listened quietly and nodded slightly to express his understanding of Ethan's position. Ethan paused for a moment and continued, "However, I also understand your concerns. The members of the Order of the Phoenix played an important role in this operation. They are innocent baits. If we really catch them, that is indeed a bit too unauthentic." He pondered for a while, and then made a compromise suggestion. "How about this? In view of the special nature of tonight's incident, the Ministry of Magic will only issue a warning as a punishment for them. But I hope that this incident can make the wizarding world truly aware of the seriousness of the law, rather than treating the law with a humane touch as before." Ethan looked up at Dumbledore and said seriously, "Headmaster Dumbledore, I believe that only in this way can our wizarding society be more just and orderly. The law should not be a piece of paper, but should be a solid foundation for maintaining the order of our society. I hope you will understand and support my decision." "Your idea does sound exciting, Ethan," Dumbledore said gently. "But if you are still willing to listen to the advice of an old man like me, I hope you can take a more steady pace when promoting reforms. You are still young and have enough time to realize these ambitious plans. Change that is too rapid or radical can often cause unintended harm." After solving the Order's problem, Dumbledore turned his attention to Ethan and the girls around him. A flash of admiration crossed his eyes. "I must admit, I underestimated your growth rate. Ethan, your performance today is indeed impressive. In my memory, no wizard has shown such outstanding abilities and wisdom at your age. Not to mention, you also brought a group of equally outstanding companions?" Dumbledore smiled and winked at Ethan. I will talk to Miss Jaina Proudmoore later. I originally planned to invite you to discuss matters about your class schedule, but seeing the concerned eyes of these girls, he pointed to the girls around him, I think it's better for you to take a rest first. Ethan nodded helplessly. As expected of Dumbledore, no matter how hard he tried to hide it, the headmaster still noticed his current weakness. Thank you, Headmaster Dumbledore. I think we can find a more suitable time to discuss these matters. As he said that, his eyes inadvertently fell on the hood of Dumbledore's dark purple robe studded with silver stars. Suddenly, he was stunned for a moment and pointed to a few popcorns exposed in the hood with some embarrassment. Headmaster, you seem to have a few popcorns in your hood. Dumbledore was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. He took off his hood, shook it, and a few popcorn fell out. Oh, it seems you discovered my little secret. He smiled, picked up a piece of popcorn, and put it in his mouth. I have to admit, the programs broadcast on the TV station you established are indeed quite attractive. Sometimes I can't help but eat a few popcorns while watching TV. Ethan and the girls around him were all amused by Dumbledore's actions, and the atmosphere finally relaxed.